City Council regular meeting for Monday, February 22nd, 2021. Welcome everybody. Before we start, I just want to tell you that one of our council family members is leaving after a long history with the city, Sandra Nunnally, who's worked as an admin for the council. She's worked for the city for 21 years, and she and her husband combined have worked for the city for 54 years. So a well-deserved retirement, and she's going to be very missed. We're not having a meeting on March 1st because we will all be in a retreat, a council retreat at the end of this week, and typically we don't hold our meetings after we've had retreats at the end of the week. So let's do a roll call, City Clerk.
Thank you. Mayor Robinson?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse?
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale?
Here.
Councilmember Lee?
Here.
Councilmember Robertson?
Here.
Councilmember Stokes?
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn?
Here.
Thank
Councilmember Stokes, would you like to lead us in the flag salute?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, well, we have two proclamations this week. The first one is for Black History Month. Councilmember Barksdale, would you like to read that proclamation in its entirety?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Whereas during Black History Month, we recognize and celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by Black people to our nation's social, artistic, cultural, political, and economic advancement. And whereas in 1976, Black History Month was formally adopted to honor and affirm the importance of Black history throughout the American experience. And whereas the observance of Black History Month calls our attention to the continued need to battle racism and build a more just society that lives up to our democratic ideals. And whereas the events of this past year remind us that we have far to go to end racial injustice and inequity in our nation and local communities. And whereas the City of Bellevue is committed to ensuring access, equity, inclusion, and opportunity for all. And whereas, as part of this commitment, the City Council undertook a pledge in June 2020 to take a fresh look at use of force policies and policing to ensure Black, Indigenous, and people of color are safe, respected, and served equitably. And whereas we welcome our community's participation in this crucial process to realize Bellevue's mission to welcome the world, celebrate Black history as an important part of American history, and achieve justice and equity for all members of our community. And whereas we strive to raise awareness of the history and contributions of communities of color, most recently with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit, a Black History Month panel, and a virtual adaptation of the American History Traveling Museum, The Unspoken Truths, available until March 31st, 2021, through the city's website. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2021 as Black History Month, and urge all residents to join us as we reflect on our shared history, commemorate and reaffirm the contributions of Black people to our communities, our country, and to the world, and to continue efforts to battle racism and to build a society that is more just, peaceful, and prosperous for all.
Thank you. We had a great Black History celebration last week, and if you go to the City of Bellevue's website, you can go explore this virtual Black History Museum, which is really very well done. That will be up, I think, until through the end of the month. And then we have another proclamation for Lunar New Year. Councilmember Zahn, would you like to read that one?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Whereas over 1 billion people in China and millions in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and around the world, including many Bellevue residents, are celebrating the Lunar New Year. And whereas the Lunar New Year, based on the lunar calendar, started in mid-February this year in Asia, and is a time when people travel to celebrate with family and friends. And whereas this is the year of the ox, one of the 12 animal signs that comes from the Chinese zodiac. And whereas people born this year are said to assume the traits of an ox, including strength, intelligence, reliability, and fairness. And whereas while we cannot gather in person due to COVID-19 pandemic impacts, observers can still meet virtually and enjoy performances. And whereas the beginning of the Lunar New Year is a celebration of spring and the hope it brings, and whereas the city of Bellevue recognizes the value of its diverse residents and the significant cultural contribution of our Asian and Pacific Islander communities. And now, therefore, I, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of its City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of February 21st to 28th as Week of the Lunar New Year, and encourage residents to join their neighbors in this annual celebration, while also wishing good fortune, health, and happiness to all residents, workers, and visitors.
Great, thank you. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. There were no pre-registered speakers for oral communications, and looking at our Zoom call now, there is no one from the public connected to the call. So at this point, we can close oral communications.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. All right, next we have report of the city manager, Mr. Miyake.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson and council members. I have one formal report under the city manager's report. As many of you know, the Bellevue Fire Department planned and developed and implemented a mobile vaccination team to assist in vaccinating a number of our communities, high-risk individuals in adult family homes. This evening, Chief Hagan will provide a brief update of this team's past and as well as the future work that they plan in the community. With that, I'll hand it over to Chief Hagan.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse, City Manager Miyake, members of council. I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with a quick vaccination update. Mayor, I think about last March, I don't think we contemplated the grim milestone that we just passed, which is in excess of 500,000 deaths in our country due to COVID-19, including 4,822 Washingtonians. And now we're watching the emergence of several COVID variants that we're concerned about. However, there are positive results to report. Nationally, we're just cresting over 5% of our country that has been vaccinated in some form, and we're watching those numbers rise every day. We're seeing a literal free fall in terms of the numbers of positive test results, hospitalizations, and deaths. So where we're at right now is a point of guarded optimism. Regarding the efforts of our city and our department, I'm really proud to report that as of today, our mobile vaccination teams have completed 22 days of operations. We have just completed the first round for adult family homes and 4 of our senior living facilities. This represents over 800 people who have been vaccinated with the first round. We're now beginning to retrace our steps about a month later after we started and providing second round of the Moderna vaccination. Just for reference, there are 138 adult family homes in our service area. We contacted every single one of them to make sure that they had a viable plan or that we would take care of them. 50 of those adult family homes had made other arrangements, primarily through the federal pharmacy program. We vaccinated the rest. We were able to, with help, make positive contact of all 138 to get with them and make sure that they knew we were coming or they had a viable plan. So that was really well worth the effort. We've been averaging just over 36 folks per day. Our goal is to have second doses completed by March 16th. And we have 3 additional senior living facilities that we plan to vaccinate during this next month. Our ratio of vaccinations is running about 2/3 residents in these facilities and 1/3 staff members. We have been able to partner with several groups in the area and able to find medically vulnerable populations that might have otherwise slipped through the cracks. These are primarily King County EMS, Public Health, Seattle, King County, and others. When our adult family homework is done, we hope to get additional direction from public health about where we can go next. Vaccine availability continues to be spotty. Most recently, the winter weather you all saw in the news across the country has resulted in a most recent delay. But we are hopeful that the vaccine supply is going to become more dependable. And just to reiterate from my last presentation, after Seattle Fire Department, we were next in line to partner with King County. From the go order to the first shot delivered was 3 days, and it was 9 days until our teams had been assembled, trained, and put into the field. So we're so proud of the partnerships we have and the fact that we're able to do this work. As well, we have been able to assist our partners and our neighbors in standing up teams of their own. So our regional partnerships are strong and effective. Thank you so much for the ongoing support and the opportunity to provide this update.
Mayor Robinson, I have one last item it's not on the agenda, but I did want to highlight that this week is Engineers Week. And I wanted to acknowledge the great work of all the city engineers, as well as I know we have 2 council members here that actually have engineer degrees by trade, and council members Conrad Lee and council member Zahn. So want to thank all the great work of all the city engineers, and again, just wanted to acknowledge them this evening. And that concludes my report for this evening, Mayor.
Thank you. Well, I'm just so proud of our firefighters for getting out there and reaching the most vulnerable in our community. And I just want to put out there that if there's somebody that you know that is unable, that qualifies for the vaccine and is unable to find an appointment or is unable to get out to get an appointment, if they want to contact me, lrobinson@bellevuewa.gov. There's a lot of organizations and volunteers that are working hard to get people their appointments, and the firefighters, if we hear of a group of people who are living together, we'll alert them and see if they can get the county support to vaccinate residents. So anyway, that's an option, but I hope everybody's able to navigate this confusing system. Okay, so we have consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve that?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we have 3 or 4.
Madam,
Pardon me?
Sorry to interrupt your order of business. Can I ask Chief Hagan a question regarding the vaccination?
Is this something you could follow up with an email after the meeting?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So we have 4 items on our study session. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce them?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. As you mentioned, there's 4 items, and the first topic on your study session agenda this evening is an update from Sound Transit CEO Peter Rogoff on the status of Sound Transit's high capacity projects, as well as an overview of the Sound Transit Board's realignment process, which is focused on adjusting their capital program and due to the economic impacts of COVID. Tonight's presentation is informational and provides the council an opportunity to ask questions and provide CEO Rogoff any feedback. With that, I want to welcome you, Peter, and pass the baton over to Joyce Nichols, Assistant Manager, to begin the presentation. Joyce?
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Next time, we're not going to write you such good talking points because I have nothing left to say, basically, except I'd like to welcome Peter to the meeting tonight. I think it's an exciting time in where we are with all the high capacity transit projects. The tunnel that's behind Peter is especially interesting, and maybe he can explain to us which tunnel that is and where it goes. But I think there's a lot of excitement and a lot of enthusiasm around Eastlink and where we are with that. And tonight we're going to hear about some of the more problematic issues that Sound Transit Board is having to grapple with. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted everybody's life to some extent and has really wreaked havoc on our transit systems. As more people stayed home as a result of the governor's stay home, stay healthy orders, transit ridership really declined, and that left almost all transit agencies in a very big bind. So Sound Transit wasn't immune from this, but I do believe they have a plan for how they're going to approach the deficit, or I guess it would not be a deficit, it's a shortfall in revenue. And so I'm excited to hear what Peter has to say about that tonight. And I think it's good to hear an update on just where we are with Eastlink, because as I said, it's very exciting. Peter?
Well, thank you, and thank you very much for having me. I was just thinking it has been years since I've had the opportunity to meet with the council, and some of the new council. I know you're not new council members, but you're new since the last time I've had the opportunity to be with you. So I really appreciate this opportunity. As Brad knows, our teams are working together really all the time. I don't think there's really a 2 or 3 day spell that goes by when city staff and Sound Transit staff are not collaborating on the future vision for transit in Bellevue. And as was pointed out, Eastlink is really starting to take shape, not just in terms of the transit benefits that it'll provide, but all of the economic development that's been happening around it. We are very far along on the operations and maintenance facility with a great vision here again that we're working with Bellevue City staff. So I'm going to go through a series of slides, and I'm hoping that someone other than me is teed up to run them. And just first say thank you for the opportunity to come before you. We can go to the next slide. As was pointed out, I am going to talk a little bit about what is going on with Eastlink, as well as the maintenance facility, as well as at least the planning process going around for the STRIDE Bus Rapid Transit program, and also share with you the challenges that the agency will face, like many transit agencies across the country, from depleted revenues. And as I'll explain when we get to that discussion, our challenge is not just depleted revenues, but actually some troubling trends on increased costs that really combine together to contribute to our affordability gap. Why don't we go to our next slide? So we are indeed powering progress across the region. You know, we did struggle when COVID first hit and had to shut down some 80% of our construction due to the pandemic, but I will tell you that we were very fortunate to work very carefully with our contractors and our partners in the labor movement with the building trades on how to reopen construction safely. So we have gotten all of that 80% back, and you know, over the life of our program, we will have supported over 240,000, perhaps as many as 304,000 well-paying construction jobs, and you see many thousands of them on the 8 major capital projects in which we're in construction right now. We have been able, like I said, through COVID to get back to full capacity on all of our projects, albeit with very, very careful training of the construction workforce for COVID safety. We've been very pleased with the record of low infections among the construction workforce. People have really gotten into a cadence on how to do this safely. And while it has introduced some challenges and some timing issues with some of the projects, none are behind schedule. And everyone, the most important factor, namely the safety of all of the entire workforce, has been able to be front of mind throughout. Why don't we go to the next slide? So we are currently in construction on 8 major projects at the same time. I will tell you it's a little bit challenging, and I think many of you know that Ron Lewis, who was our executive project director, who I think you've all met because he was heading up the Eastlink project, got tapped to be our new executive director for design, engineering, and construction, and therefore is overseeing the entire waterfront on all of these projects that are currently in construction. The great news really is that every one of these projects is on schedule, and only one of them is over budget, and that's the Hilltop Tacoma project, because of what can happen in working in any older city. We discovered upon opening up the streets to build the streetcar that the utilities weren't where they were mapped to be. That triggered a series of redesigns. But even with that, it is on schedule, however, trending over budget. The other projects on this list are all on or ahead of budget, or on or ahead of schedule. So we're really pleased with the performance of these. In the end, we will triple our light rail network, going from 22 miles to 62, and from 22 stations to 50, all by 2024. So we'll have 28 new light rail stations by 2024, 10 of them, of course, on Eastlink, with the other 2 going to downtown Redmond just 1 year later. Why don't we go to the next slide? Eastlink, as was pointed out, is progressing really well. And the more work that gets behind us, the more confident we are in our ability to deliver it on time and deliver it on or ahead of budget. Really, more and more of what we would calculate as the risk is frankly behind us, as you see more and more of the infrastructure go up. We have been working, like I said, on the operations and maintenance facility east, and working with Bellevue staff to ensure that we get an affordable housing component, as well as the development of 925,000 square feet of public amenities and mixed-use, mixed-income development, which is going to include roughly 500 housing units with 280 designated affordable housing units, led by the Bridge Housing Group that we've been partnering with, and while also partnering with the city around our shared vision for an urban hub at the Spring District 120th Street station. There's a lot of just exciting stuff going on, and I've got to tell you that it's really been made possible with the partnership between our agency and the city staff. And I did not want to leave that topic without acknowledging the efforts of Nancy Lacombe, who I understand is retiring in the near future. We couldn't have gotten here without her partnership, as well as the collaboration of a great many other staff, both on the Sound Transit side and the Bellevue City side. We are really proud of how Eastlink is going. And like I said, it really means a traffic-free 20-minute light rail ride from Bellevue downtown to downtown Seattle, or a 10-minute traffic ride between downtown Bellevue and the Redmond Technology Station. We are still projecting that it'll serve 43,000 to 52,000 new riders. Really things have been hitting all their marks in terms of the on-time delivery of projects. Next month, we are going to have a fairly major milestone. Crews will be connecting the overhead electric wires on our current line to the Eastlink overhead wires, creating a pivotal future junction to the east side from our International District Chinatown Station in downtown Seattle. I think, as many of you know, we do actually have some new rail cars that have been delivered for testing purposes at our maintenance facility on the east side. So there are light rail trains in Bellevue. They do not connect to Seattle yet, but they are there for the necessary testing around the maintenance facility, and that is also going well. This September, we will open the garage at South Bellevue Station early for transit riders to use, a full 2 years ahead of the Eastlink opening. And I have to congratulate our board member and your former mayor, Claudia Balducci, who has reminded us at every conceivable turn on the importance of opening that facility early. It got almost to be an inside joke at Sound Transit that every time we would brief her again on the status of Eastlink, we would be asked how soon we could reopen the South Bellevue parking facility. And as a result, we did work collaboratively and kind of creatively with our contractor there to open up 2 years early, which will be a benefit for those folks who are will still be boarding the 550 ahead of the introduction of light rail. I thought I'd talk a little bit about our work together on the 405 Brt system, which is the next slide, I believe. I'm hoping. So our overall network expansion does include 45 miles of new Stride bus rapid transit. It's 37 miles of BRT will run on 405 between Linwood and Burien with 11 stations, including light rail and bus connections at the Bellevue Transit Center, where we will be making modifications to improve throughput and capacity. We do project we'll have about 26,000 daily boardings on I-405 bus rapid transit when it's delivered. Stride will serve Bellevue with 2 lines, the S1 line, which will connect Burien through Tukwila, Renton, and then up to Bellevue, which will intercept light rail in 2 places. And it'll shave about 17 minutes off of today's bus travel times between Burien and Bellevue. The S2 line, which will run between Bellevue and Linwood, will shave 24 minutes off the current bus trip, and that is a considerable time savings. These 2 lines will converge at the Bellevue Transit Center across the street from the Bellevue downtown light rail station. So both of these lines will intercept light rail in 2 different places. It'll intercept, the north line will intercept at Linwood and Bellevue. The south line will intercept at Bellevue and Tukwila. So we are pleased to be also working with Bellevue City staff on this initiative. And this is what brings us really to the realignment process. If we go to the next slide. Our challenge really is embedded in what I had said at the very beginning of my presentation. We have sort of a double whammy, if you will, of shrunken revenues because of COVID-19 and rising costs attributable to a number of factors, but the largest one is the fact that even in the presence of a recession in the middle of a pandemic, the prices of property that we must procure and pay fair market value for to deliver our transit expansions just continues to rise at a rate even faster than the very aggressive growth projection that we associated with the rising cost of property in the region. I could tell you anecdotally, there have been some pieces of property that have just literally, even commercial property that we would procure like for a bus base or similar type facilities where the value of the property has more than doubled in just a 2 or 3 year period. And that if that trend is continuing, we see trends both on the property acquisition and the actual cost of construction. There is still, notwithstanding a pandemic and a recession, a very hot construction market in this region. We are competing for both workers and the attention of bidders with a lot of the vertical construction that continues throughout the region. So that has yielded pretty sizable cost growth in our projections. And I should say these are still just projections. These are not the projects we currently have on construction. Like I said, all but one of those is on budget and all of them are on schedule. But the next tranche of projects, which includes the 405 BRT, but also light rail on to Tacoma, to West Seattle and Ballard, up to Everett, those projects are just seeing increases in their cost projections, even at just 10 to 15% design that are worrisome. So if you want to go to the next slide, thank you. This sort of characterizes what our overall situation is. We do have a revenue loss of about $6.1 billion. That's projected all the way through 2041. But we also have to take these recent trends and costs and extrapolate them over building the entire system through 2041, which yields to a $12.3 billion higher in estimated costs. There are some offsets in terms of debt capacity that we will not have used and a slightly higher grant assumption, which yields an overall affordability gap for the entire program through 2041 of about $11.5 billion. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? So how are we addressing that at Sound Transit? Well, the ballot measure as adopted in ST3 and ST2 had very identical language, requires the board to go through, and when they know the program to be unaffordable, it triggers what's called a realignment process. It requires the board to take a look at the plans that we have for those next tranche of projects, not the ones currently in construction, and use a variety of tools to make the program affordable. The board did this already once in 2010, because some of you may remember that the ST2 ballot measure passed at the end of 2008, and we went right into the greatest recession since the Great Depression. And that required the board to set new delivery dates for certain projects, to truncate certain projects shorter than they might have initially been planned to do. And in some cases, this only happened in some very small instances, and small projects were actually canceled. But what you have here is the tools that the board intends to use as part of this process this time. Obviously looking at where we can trim costs where we can. Also, the board is very determined to seek additional capacity wherever we can. And in this particular case, we're thinking a lot about the fact that down in Olympia, they are looking at new transportation revenue packages. And since there's a lot of focus on climate-friendly investments in Olympia, frankly, there are few, if any, in the state that are more climate-friendly than our capital investments. And if we would welcome Olympia's help in helping us close that affordability gap. Also, the new efforts by the Biden administration on a Build Back Better plan. I just had a conversation this morning with a number of the new assistant secretaries in Secretary Buttigieg's office. It has been, fully announced that the president intends to submit to Congress a Build Back Better plan after we get through this COVID-19 reconciliation bill. And we see all kinds of opportunities where Sound Transit really mirrors the goals of the Biden administration's Build Back Better plan by generating thousands of new green jobs, by building projects that really address climate change head on, that build projects that have the opportunity to really address equity gaps throughout the region. And we made that presentation to administration officials this morning, and I will be making several more to several other folks and working very carefully with our congressional delegation to see if we can't grow our federal contribution to our program. Why don't we go to the next slide? So these are the next steps in terms of what the board intends to do on the schedule. There's already been a discussion of realignment approaches. Next month, we will be talking about how we engage the public in this dialogue. And I would strongly encourage not just the city of Bellevue, but all city governments and all citizens from around the region to engage in this process. We will also be getting feedback in March and April from a third-party contractor. When I talked about those increases in cost estimates for that next tranche of projects, when we first saw just how large they were and how quickly they came upon us with just a small increase in design, it was recognized that we really should get an independent third party to take a look at that cost estimating to make sure that we have it right, or at least in the ballpark, before the board is required to make any difficult decisions. We will then be discussing the public feedback with the board, and we expect the board to charge us with developing a variety of different realignment plans, and hopefully adopt a realignment plan by the month of July. 2 months later than that, we'll open light rail to Northgate. And that'll be the beginning of opening a major expansion of transit in the region every year for the next 3 years. Because like I said, as identified earlier, we'll open Northgate this year, the Tacoma Hilltop project next year, Eastlink the year after that, and then in 2024, we will open light rail all the way up to Linwood, all the way down to Federal Way, and all the way out to Redmond Town Center. And that is all funded. That is not being looked at for any realignment efforts. In fact, it is all currently under construction and going well. So I believe that may be my last slide. Can we check? Yep. thank you for the time. I'd really be happy to answer any questions and any. I know that your meeting is time constrained. If council members or others have further questions, I would just encourage you to get to us, and we're happy to answer them. What we can answer now and others later.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We do have time to take questions and comments from the council. So I'm going to call on people in this order: Councilmember Zahn, followed by Robertson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, Councilmember Stokes, Councilmember Lee, Barksdale, and then myself. So Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Peter. I mean, so exciting to have South Bellevue Park can ride open early. I know how much we have pushed for that, so we appreciate Councilmember Balducci for doing that. And really, it'll be also the first light rail across a floating bridge.
Yeah.
So also very exciting to have that coming across our city. I think that we sent a letter urging to keep moving forward with the BRT. So I hope that, although we didn't spend much time talking about it here, that Sound Transit is really pushing to make sure that, my understanding is we have the funding on the south end, but not the north end right now. And we need to get the whole route all the way through, so that that is really our east side light rail, right? For want of a better word. And then I guess the other one I am curious about is when we think about opening the light rail, I know that in some of the other light rail stations, there has been some issues with the vertical conveyance and the escalators having some issues. So I just want to make sure that the ones that are going to be built on the east side, that we are making sure that they are more reliable and perhaps a little higher quality than those that might have been built prior.
So let me address that straight on. We did, especially, there's a whole host of reasons why, especially the vertical conveyances that were at the University of Washington Station did not perform as intended. Some were just some bad missteps that we could see in the rearview mirror. Some had to do with not, frankly, procuring the highest quality, most robust escalators for transit use. Part of it was not recognizing that college students were going to jump up and down on the comb plates as they fly off the escalators. I think we maybe weren't totally cognizant of who our audience was going to be at a university campus. But all those things in combination, it certainly wasn't the agency's finest hour. And frankly, through a lot of hard work, reliability now at that station is at or above the average. Now, we do have some very challenging new vertical conveyances that Sound Transit just took possession of in the downtown Seattle Transit Tunnel that we're going to have to do many years of investment to now completely rehabilitate, in some cases, completely rip out. As for the new stations, we have been much more attentive to not only what we're buying, but to the reliability there. I'll be honest, I wish there was more competition in this space between manufacturers, vendors, and maintainers of those systems. But I'm quite confident that we will have, not just because of them being more robust when we procure them, but the fact that we're going to have redundant stairs, and they are, the ones at the University of Washington were subjected to a really challenging design and also a very challenging work environment where it was a construction site with active escalators for years. That is not what we're having with the East Side Station. So I'm very optimistic about that.
Thank you. And then my only other comment would be, as you look at the realignment and your cost estimates, that I believe Sound Transit is looking at, other methods of procurement and potentially looking at progressive design build and how we might be able to, do some of the value engineering with a design builder and look at some of the choices to perhaps get a little more cost predictability and work through the what if scenarios before you lock in pricing and then potentially end up with some challenges. So hopefully that will start to move. Thank you.
Yeah, our experience with design build has been progressing well. As you know, certain segments of Eastlink were done by design build, as is our extension down to Federal Way. And we are seeing the benefits of that approach, and we expect to continue to see them.
Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Hi, Peter. Good to see you.
Good to see you, ma'am.
We are so excited. This has been such a long time coming. I cannot wait to see light rail open. And hopefully it will be before the end of 2023. I know that things are progressing really well, so I'm really happy to hear that. I have a couple of questions about the realignment process and the costs of ST3. So one of the bases for the increased cost is stakeholder requests to expand project scopes. And that caught my eye because we in Bellevue had that same situation with Sound Transit. We wanted to have a downtown tunnel. It wasn't in the project scope. And so Bellevue and Sound Transit worked really closely together. We resolved it by entering into a partnership for funding. So Bellevue providing funding as well as things of value. And also we worked really closely together to, Councilmember Stokes remembers this, he was with me on this. We worked on the cost savings work to try to, make it first help fund it, second help make it cheaper. So that seemed to be a real win for Sound Transit and for Bellevue. And it also was really important in preserving sub-area equity so that other sub-areas weren't paying for Bellevue to have this expanded scope of the tunnel, at least not fully paying for it. So to the extent that some of the increases in Sound Transit 3 are due to scope expansion, I'd like to know what, if anything, Sound Transit is going to do to enter into funding agreements with local governments for cost sharing or cost savings like we did, and how Sound Transit will ensure that sub-area equity is maintained so that one sub-area doesn't bear the burden of a scope expansion for another sub-area. And to that end, how will you use sub-area equity in your realignment decision in terms of delaying or phasing or even canceling projects? We want to make sure that things are fair, that money raised in sub-areas is not unduly sent to other sub-areas. And to that extent, we definitely appreciate Councilmember Song commenting on BRT, our north-south light rail line, basically. We're going to have 30,000 jobs, new jobs by the time that opens. So let's keep it on track. So there's my plug. But would you answer my questions about the potential funding agreements with other communities, as well as sub-area equity will be used on that and all realignment decisions?
Sure. So yes, we do have, and I didn't bring it in the presentation, but there is another slide that we've been using that really lists all of the potential ways that we can enjoy, basically have expanded capacity to deliver on the program as planned, which could include third-party funding, not just for betterments, but for components of the system that otherwise might be delayed and people might want to fund locally. Let me give you an example. Among the options that have been talked about is, would it make sense, for example, on the 522 BRT option? It's one of the things that, in a broad universe, I'm not saying that there's support for this or lack of support for it, but to build the light rail connections first and build the parking later, to segment things, to spread out the drain on our debt capacity by building some segments now and some segments later. Well, there's nothing about some of those later investments that if, especially a parking facility, which you may be able to finance in part by charging for parking, that someone might want to help finance to deliver it sooner. So I think, the view of the board, I've not heard any board members want to turn down the opportunity to partner with someone to deliver something sooner. That could be one of the things that approaches. I mean, obviously, someone who just wants a tunnel that is not needed other than the fact that they want it, that would have to trigger a conversation between the board and those municipalities in terms of how it was going to get financed. I think part of it, Councilmember Robertson, is really, there are big betterments in the form of the tunnel. We also, if you will, die a death of 1,000 cuts, because there are always little things that cities would like as augmented to some of these projects that they look to us to help finance. Sometimes they actually try and require it of us by passing local codes and ordinances, and that can sometimes be a frustration. I wouldn't call it massive scope creep, but it's kind of incremental. We are often called on to deliver, when we go in and do construction, to deliver the property back to the community in much better condition than we received it, in ways that are unrelated to the transit improvement, but the city feels, and I'm not going to point to any one city or another, the city feels that if you're going to go and dig up the streets, why don't you return it to the vision we would like it to be, since you're already in there ripping it up. We're just going to need to take a much harder line with communities to make sure that we don't engage in that kind of minor scope creep. You asked about sub-area equity, and sub-area equity still pertains. The dollars collected in a sub-area are expected to be spent on investments that benefit people in that sub-area. And we will be making sure that we subject whatever the final realignment plan is. It does have a requirement to make sure that no one sub-area is lending so much money to another sub-area as to endanger the projects within their sub-area. And that is really the test. I think everyone in the public and in the board needs to appreciate that sub-areas are lending each other money all the time. We don't keep 5 separate banks, but we very carefully account for what dollars are collected in those sub-areas to make sure that over the life of the plan, the people in that sub-area enjoy benefits from those investments. And we will be doing the same as part of this process as required by our governing ballot measure and that language.
Great, thank you. That's very, very helpful.
Hey, Deputy Mayor Newhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. And Peter, good to see you. Thanks for being here with us. Thanks for the great update. And just want to let you know I'm personally willing to make myself available to make BRT an inside joke, just like Claudia did on the South Bellevue Park and Ride. So if I need to jump on any Zoom calls, you just let me know. Okay?
You're certainly welcome to join us.
Okay. Great questions already by my colleagues there. I just had 2 quick questions for you. You mentioned that the ridership between 43K and 53K. You sounded pretty bullish on that. You feel like that ridership will maintain those levels. I'm just curious if you've done any surveys or polling that once we get past COVID, that we're going to see ridership maintain that level, because that number I'm assuming was that
was a pre-COVID number.
Exactly.
Yes, and we are obviously, like all transit agencies, carefully trying to monitor. The same question that all of us are asking is, what's the new normal? And we do believe that ridership patterns are going to change. But I also believe, and part of this is just based on what I've heard, having talked to a lot of people in the planning community and the business community, and part of it is just kind of personal and emotional. I think people are going to want to gather again, and when you look at the opportunities, there was a time when I had this conversation with someone years ago about, like, how do we feel about this Eastlink estimate? And the only thing that has happened since then is more and more companies are, as you well know, locating along the alignment.
Yeah.
And I've taken note of the fact that, we had an interesting pivot from when the REI facility suddenly became a Facebook facility, but it became a Facebook facility, right? With the expectation that people are going to be called there, maybe not in the same intensity, but true confessions. My son is a Facebook employee. He has been told that when he returns to work, he will be returning to work in Bellevue, and I suspect it's going to be at the REI facility. And he's just one young tech kid with all the others. He's desperate to get back to the office to be with us. He's done working in the dining room. I can tell you that.
Good. I'm sure he is, like many are.
Right. And so I really believe that there's going to be a desire for people to gather again. And when you look at the network we have, where it's not just about residential to employment. It's connection to healthcare centers, connection to the sports stadia that I know a lot of us are desperate to get back to some sense of normalcy, the opportunity to go to entertainment districts. I am not one of these people who think that our industry is in for a very cold awakening, that people aren't going to gather and they're not going to take transit anymore. I just don't think that's the future.
I agree. And I'm sure you're already thinking about doing things that maybe, pre-COVID you were thinking about doing in terms of having, hand sanitizer available in every.
We are, and in fact, we are installing, it is our intention to install, at least while we still, and it sounds like we will still see the importance of masks for some time, we're installing mask dispensers in every one of our rail cars.
Fantastic. And then back to the South Bellevue Park and Ride, do we have a date yet when we think that will be actually open and fully operational and people can take advantage of that? I don't think that has, go ahead.
I will tell you something that won't surprise you. When I do know what that date is, the first person I'm telling is Board Member Balducci, and she'll inform everybody else before we talk.
Very good. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, Peter, it's good to see you. It's been a while, and
yes, sir.
Yeah, really,
you were a little bit more clean shaven the last time we gathered.
Right. As Councilmember Robertson said, I'm going the ZZ Top route. Of course, I got to learn how to play the guitar, but
not really.
Anyhow, it's really good to see you, and a lot of comments that have been made already, and I appreciate Councilmember Robertson reminding us of the journey we've taken since 2012 in this, and it's just so exciting to see all this come together. And this has been a great project all along with all the elements that have been discussed on this and the funding and everything else, where this has been a true partnership and joint effort on this. And I think that's very well appreciated. And I think it's resulted in the whole project being a lot better than it would have been. And, we learned lessons in the first installation in Seattle, but we didn't repeat those. So, that's been very good. And it's just exciting to see this come together. It's been also fun to watch the changes in the neighborhoods and among people in the city and the community about light rail. We're so excited now, and we hope that this would be the result when we get it all going, but it's really, really amazing. So I appreciate all you've talked about this and all. I have a couple of things to mention or ask about. One is again a strong plug for the BRT. And again, we sent a letter with several cities back in September, and we're really pushing that because the BRT, real BRT, as we call it, is going to be a really important part of this. And it has a lot of benefits, but it's just an addition to the light rail. It's not a replacement of that, and it's getting a certain corridors put together. How we fund it, we don't know, but that's very important. So we're really pushing for that and glad to see continued efforts, and appreciate now legislator Davina Doerr's effort in getting us all together to work for the whole corridor. And I think that's important too. The other,
if I could just comment on that just for a moment, I'm glad you made this reference to real BRT because as I think Council Member, there is a challenge that we're all facing together, and we could use legislator Doerr's help and that of Vandana Slatter and others. There is envisioned, and we were very, very excited about, pre-COVID, the action that the legislature took to fund the inline stations to make the BRT North project a much better and faster project by allowing us to stay in line. Those projects were funded with the toll revenue from the hot lanes on 405. now that traffic is off because of COVID, when that revenue will actually materialize to build those improvements is not known. Now we benefit from having Secretary Millar on the Sound Transit Board, so we can converse on this directly. But there has been discussion, including among the one that Jay Arnold and I had with Jake Fye not long ago about, is there any way to try and maybe get some state funding to backfill those projects for 405 North that lost out on that revenue? That's an open question for the legislature to consider. But that's how we get real BRT, is by seeing those investments happen, so that 405 North segment can really enjoy the time savings that we were envisioning.
Right. Well, that's really exciting. I think we will really push hard on that. And one of the things that we developed 2 years ago in getting that working in the legislature was getting a real partnership and working relationship with the business community, the Chamber of Commerce and all, and a unified approach to, because we all realize that having great transportation systems, including that, is important. And to build a halfway BRT thing is just going to kind of mess things up. So we really have to push for that. So I'm sure we will do exactly what you're asking and really push on that. I appreciate that. The last thing I want to ask you is there any feeling of some hope or promise that the federal spending will increase with the emphasis being made now on understanding we have a transportation infrastructure problem all over the country, and what we're doing is really addressing that. How's your feeling on that?
I'm tentatively optimistic. I do worry. I'm very interested to see what the Build Back plan is about from the Biden administration, and we're frankly trying to pitch them on what we think could be most helpful, not only for their goals on green jobs and climate friendly investments, but obviously how we in this region can deliver them. The highway and transit program doesn't actually expire now till September. I think the administration wants to move something forward faster than that, which we would welcome. But the board is very serious about, it's not an enjoyable process by any stretch to have to go back to the voters and say that we can't deliver things in the original schedule. We would really welcome the help of both Olympia and Washington, D.C. in helping us get back on schedule, because these are precisely the kind of investments that the administration has been talking about. Thousands and thousands of green jobs. As I pointed out to them, greenhouse gas emissions in the state of Washington come principally from transportation. In a lot of other states, they come principally from electricity generation. So if you really want to attack climate change here in this state, you have to attack it on the transportation front. And I don't think that there's any other investments in the state that could have as big an impact as ours. So we're going to certainly make that pitch. I'm optimistic, but having worked for the Appropriations Committee in DC for 22 years, it's never done till it's done, right? And right. We'll see how that all comes out.
Well, appreciate that very much, and good seeing you, and looking forward to our completion of this whole thing and on time, and well within the budget as the best we can. So thanks for the job, and thanks for coming, and we'll see you again.
Hey, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Yes. Thank you.
When I was earlier saying that you can walk on water, I mean, that is quite a compliment I want to put on you. I've been on the council for so long. I've been working with Sound Transit, way back. And when I was the mayor, we finalized, the agreement with you guys for the East Link to happen. And so I know the challenges we've gone through, a lot of conversation, discussion, back and forth. I mean, it's just amazing, you know. So to get to where we are now, you know, I mean, with you working on the execution of the thing. And, you know, and you mentioned you do things you have done so far under budget, on time, you know, that's quite a task. And so, so I'm not joking when I say you can walk on water. But the one thing I want to mention, I got three things I want to talk about. Walking on water is when the train comes across Lake Washington, you're going to be running on a floating bridge. That, you know, as an engineer, you know, I kind of remember asked you, supposedly it hasn't been done before. So what's your progress on that test? And are we confident, what's 99.9% that it's going to work as expected?
Well, I'm not going to give a number, but we're extremely confident, and it's in part because it has been, you know, there has been components that are now being installed on the bridges that were tested in offsite facilities. There has been expert panels, some appointed by government, to oversee this process. We really consulted with a great, really, every international expert that had something to lend to the planning of this. And the installation has gone well, which is to say, and that's an important aspect, is, you know, we are using some extraordinarily expensive glue to affix the structure to the roadbed. Great partnership with WashDOT, because we have to recognize that we are building on, you know, on their facility and on their pontoons. But everything has really gone well. We obviously have not yet run a train over it, but we have no reason to think that it's not going to perform as expected.
Right, good. Yeah, you don't want to have situations where you have to stop the train every couple of days to fix the track or something like that. So I'm glad that I'm sure you know, with your execution so far, you know, it's going to run smoothly. And that leads to the second thing. You know, working with Bellevue, you know, we went through the process. You know, I said earlier, by the end of the day, it's going to be, it is better for everybody, right? It's better for the community, better for the system, and, you know, the result is much better. And so I think we want to celebrate, appreciate, you know, what we've gone through. And so the Bellevue Garage you mentioned is 2 years ahead. So that's a great, great accomplishment. And I think that also points out that working with Bellevue, it's a great, great thing to do. I think people don't appreciate it. I've been with Bellevue for so long. You know, they have a great staff. They do a good job in construction, in execution. So I hope that, you know, you find that working with Bellevue, it's a great experience. We want to continue doing this, you know, as we will move through, especially with the maintenance center, right? And we have a wonderful development that's going to be coming out, and there's great opportunities in the future. So I want to suggest that, you know, we should be very optimistic, looking for a great job. The final one is the BRT. I think that's I'm glad to see that you have put a lot of routes emphasis, you know, on that, connecting all the way from Burien, you know, all the way to up north to Linwood. You know, that's just amazing how we can connect 405. And the 405 is probably, now I watch every day, probably one of the busiest freeway in the country. And, you know, so I think we are putting the good services and passenger people working from north and south. And I see traffic congesting starting all day long. It's going both north and south. So it's a very important route. So I think with the BRT, with the improvement that we're working on, it will make a big difference. And the one thing I want to add is, you mentioned that in a way. I think we haven't talked about technology. Technology is what you're talking about, what federal government DOT is talking about. what Biden administration is talking about is green jobs, right? You said that technology can create so many jobs in new technology, in innovation, in 5G, in artificial intelligence. And so I think Bellevue is working very hard on smart transportation technology. So I look forward to, I want to emphasize, not enough emphasis, but we want to see how we can work with Sun Transit to develop better, more technologies, utilizing all the wonderful stuff people already have. It's a matter of just making sure we have policies and systems and infrastructures that can accommodate some. And so, we want to seriously see how we can make technology work better for mass transportation system. And so that's a thing both. And, I think in terms of that, I think lots of people are going to be interested. Private sector as well, not just the government. But I think if we come up with collaborative, innovative ideas, willingness to work with those different sectors, we can be leading the nation in showing how we can make our metro is already one of the best in the country. Sun Transit, you guys are going to make it just as good, and if not better. And so adding technology to it, that's going to be amazing. So I would like to see, maybe you can walk on water, continue to walk on water, and get this thing in front of all of us. And we're looking for, I know that working on the PSRC, Economic Development Board, and the Greater Seattle Partnership, they all know the future, the unlimited, the boundless opportunity of using technology to make all the things that we want to do to happen and make it better. So I want to hear a little bit about what are you thinking, what are you doing at Sun Transit, so in terms of the technological, innovative ideas.
Well, I think the most important thing that we need to do in terms of staying on top of technology is to get the best real-time information to make using transit as easy as possible. We've come a long way in terms of information that's accessible, right on your cell phone, but we can do even better, I believe. And it goes a little bit to what Councilmember Neuenhuis was talking about in terms of people want to come back, but it's got to be convenient, and people need to know it's safe. And there will be, I will tell you, it's going to be important when we have a real network that goes from all the way from, just by 2024, all the way from Federal Way to Linwood to Redmond Town Center. There are network integration issues that will sometimes inevitably, as in any transit system, could have service disruptions. People don't mind extreme delays, if not extreme, everyone minds extreme delays, but people don't mind minor delays if they know that it's, what's happening. I really want to work in a manner that we could keep passengers, if there is a short delay. I'll give you an example. It's a problem we have in our Sounder commuter rail service that runs all the way down to Tacoma and Lakewood. If we get stuck behind a BNSF train or there's a disabled train that's blocking our path, all we know is that we're stopped, and we can't tell the passenger when it's going to get better. They can call their spouse who might be waiting for them at a station, and all they could say is, I'm stuck and I don't know how long I'm going to be here. We need to treat all passengers better in terms of giving them real-time information about, what if there's a disruption, how quickly we're going to be able to get on top of it. And that should certainly be true for the light rail network to a greater degree, because we control the entire light rail network. We're not subject to, what BN will be doing on their tracks. So I think making the most important thing from my perspective on what we want to do in technology is reliability. is just giving people good real-time information on how long it's going to take them to where they're going to go. And a lot of that is available on a variety, to certain extent, on a variety of platforms. But I think we still have a ways to go. And I think some of the technology firms in our region can be very helpful in developing that new platform.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Hey, Peter.
Hey.
Hey, thanks for the update. And I'm also excited about light rail. I think the environmental and community benefits that you mentioned, I'm really excited for those reasons. I guess one question for me in terms of one of the options that's mentioned in terms of generating more revenue is increasing fares. Can you share a little bit more about what that looks like, especially just given the situation that a lot of the transit riders might be in during COVID?
Well, sure, but I will tell you that when you look at all of the areas in which that we're interested in trying to close our affordability gap, I think of that one last. And it's in part just out of concern for the riders, as you identify. It's also in part, quite honestly, from an arithmetic perspective. We derive the vast majority of our revenues from sales taxes, to a second extent, motor vehicle excise taxes, a very small property tax, certainly federal grants, which we're trying to expand. Fares is actually a very small percentage of our revenue. We're not going to be able to fix this problem on the backs of the fare payers, nor would we want to. The one thing I am interested in doing, and this really just comes from a broader issue on the equity imperative and the fact that, especially in the COVID environment, but even pre-COVID, we need to do a better job of marketing our Orca Lift option, which is something that a lot of people around the country were, pre-COVID were visiting us to try to emulate, where we can get the identical Orca card that everybody uses, but you just pay less for the same number of trips because of your income status. And when COVID hit, and we recognized that we needed to make sure that folks who were, in many cases, newly unemployed could sign up for Orca Lift without having to drag themselves down to King County Metro headquarters in Jackson Street. So we now have facilitated signing up for Orca Lift via phone with appropriate documentation. We actually want to eventually, when post-COVID, be marketing the products, and it's not just that, but also we have partnered with King County Metro on a very low income fare project, which is effectively free fares at very low income levels. How do we get those products into the hands of the folks in the community that need them? We know that more people qualify for them than have them. And if we're serious about providing that benefit, we should be equally serious about, getting into the community to get it in the hands of people that qualify, rather than waiting for them to come to us. But fares are not going to solve this affordability problem. And like I said, I think it would be the last place we'd look.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, that's really interesting what you just said there. And I hope that Sound Transit can partner with our human service agencies to maybe create a program to get that information out to the very people that need it, because we know who they are and we know people who know who they are. And so I think that would be a nice partnership to do.
We already are doing that in certain areas, ma'am, where we've got, where folks are invited to sign up for Orca Lift when accessing other human service benefits. So yes, if we're not already doing that in Bellevue, we would welcome the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll be really quick. It's been a great presentation tonight, a really good discussion. I know a lot of projects are kind of build it and they will come kind of projects. This is a they will already be here project. And so I really do get concerned about any delays, whether it be, the opening of light rail or the BRT, because 1 year of significant congestion on 405 between Linwood and Renton could just change a lot of things for people. have them make very different decisions. And we have a terrific opportunity here of guaranteed jobs, and we need guaranteed transportation. So we will be advocating for that at every level that we can as a city. But I just want you to know how sincere we are in really supporting that.
I've got no doubt about it. And we've obviously heard from the city, and I believe Bellevue took the lead in developing a letter that partnered with a great many other cities about it, and reaching out to us. One of the other challenges we're going to have is to convince people that from a COVID perspective that it's safe to return to transit. And we would look forward to, partnering, because there's a lot of mythology out there about transmission, and somehow transit is some kind of super spreading venue when it is not. We've been very successful in getting uniform mask use on our system, and working with King County Metro on getting the same in the bus environment. We are going to, I was participated in an event during the day today with the Greater Seattle Chamber, where people were pretty much saying the key is to convince folks not just that they have childcare, but also that transit is safe to get employers to feel comfortable calling people back to work wherever that is. We will certainly look forward to, when we need to put out real facts about where the COVID threat is and where it's not. We'd appreciate folks' partnership in getting that word out, because that just starts everything in a positive direction and getting folks moving again.
Yeah, well, thank you. And we will work with you on that.
Great.
All right, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. Have a great evening. Appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, so what's our next item, Mr. Miyake?
Thank you, Mayor. The next item is an update on the East Trail project's timing and fundraising. A lot of great work progressing in this area. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Joyce to do the introduce the guest and start the presentation. Joyce.
Thank you very much. Updates on the East Trail are getting to be more and more fun, because there's work that you can actually see that's been done along this trail. As you all know, it's a 42-mile trail that will connect the cities of Renton, Bellevue, Kirkland, Woodinville, and Redmond. And tonight we have an update on the projects and the timing, and also an update on the fundraising aspects. And with us tonight are King County Parks folks, Warren Jimenez and Kurt Warber. You have all seen Kurt on many, many occasions. He's a walking encyclopedia of this project. And we also have with us Catherine Hollis. And Catherine's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on with the East Rail Partners Group, which is a nonprofit group that is working with private funders to gather support and funding for projects along the East Rail. And she's here to tell you a little bit about that. And I am completely remiss from my last introduction. I should have noted that with us for the Sound Transit presentation, and with us for the East Rail presentation, we have Andrew Singalakis, who's our Transportation Director, and we have Lacey Jane Wolf, who's our Transportation Policy Advisor. And I just want to say a word about Lacey Jane, because she's been carrying a lot of the load. As you know, transportation is one of our top priorities. She's working not only with Sound Transit, but on East Rail and all the issues that are going on with the Regional Transit Committee and the PSRC Committee. So I wanted to make sure that you knew she was at the table tonight, and she will pipe in if there's any questions that fall within her purview. So there's no formal council action that's required this evening. This is an informational presentation for you to hear more during the update and ask questions and provide any feedback that you think would be helpful. And I'll turn it over to Warren now.
Great. Well, thanks for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And it's great to join you this evening. And thanks for your time. Also great to be here with Kurt, as well as Catherine this evening, and looking forward to talking a little bit more about the important work that's going on East Trail. Many of you have been involved and have been really invested in this project, and Bellevue's partnership has been really key for us to be able to realize this grand vision that we're trying to achieve here, not only just within Bellevue, but beyond. So we've been partnering for many years now on this East Trail vision, and from places like, you know, the Wilburton Trestle to the major grant from Sound Transit to Northeast 8th Overcrossing project, and the unique financial and partnership with WashDOT in association with the I-405 project that's happening right now to be able to continue to build out south on the East Trail. We're really excited to focus on 2 new partnerships that expand our ability to deliver important community projects. You mentioned earlier Catherine Hollis, who is with the East Trail Partnership, which is a partnership between the county and other East Trail stakeholders, and to support requests for state and federal funding, and new and transportation and infrastructure bills are beginning to take shape, and we're working together to position ourselves. And thanks to the East Trail Partnership, also, who has played a critical role in facilitating some really important private sector investments, including $2 million in total grants from REI and Facebook in support of the Northrop Connector. And this project will make connecting to the East Trail to SR 520 Trail, and enhancing the regional trail network and allowing new commute and recreational opportunities in the city. And then the second part we also want to talk about is our upcoming Northeast 8th Overcrossing project. And many of you who are here tonight may remember participating in charrettes focused on ways of commemorating the contribution of Bellevue's Japanese American community to farming in the city, and the impacts of incarceration during World War II, and the continued role that the Japanese Americans community plays in Bellevue. Through partnership with the city and Eastside Heritage Center, and most importantly, the volunteer members of the Commemoration Project Steering Committee, we're really happy to say that an installation on Northeast 8th Street Overcrossing will be included in the project when it goes to bid later this summer. And also want to just acknowledge and recognize Councilmember Balducci as well. Through this last budget cycle, was able to really champion additional investment to really make that happen and take place. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Catherine Hollis to provide an update on what the East Trail Partners are doing.
Thanks. I just want to make sure that the slides were not supposed to advance while you were talking, Warren.
Yeah, sorry about that. If you move forward, I think just 2, so I didn't have too many slides. So. And one more. There we go. Thanks for that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much for giving East Trail Partners some time in your meeting this evening. Honored to be here. So East Trail Partners as an organization we've been operating for a little over a year now. And our focus as a nonprofit is really about bringing together the diverse communities of Lake Washington's East Side, governmental entities invested in this project, nonprofits in the private sector, to make the vision for this 42-mile trail that'll go from Renton all the way eventually into Snohomish, Washington, a reality, and to improve equity through access to green space, to transit options. It's actually really neat to be able to talk now after the Sound Transit presentation, as so much of the East Trail was planned with a lot of that development as well. So really exciting to have both of these projects moving as they are. And in terms of equity through sort of access to connections to each other through this trail. As a non-governmental organization, our role is really to bring a unified voice to all things East Trail, building upon the foundation that our governmental partners like you all envision. And we build exemplary public-private partnerships that bring awareness and resources to this effort. And I'll talk more about that in just a bit. You can go ahead and click to the next slide. I want to sort of focus on two pieces of work that East Trail Partners brought to this effort in our first year, and how we want to continue to be able to work with City of Bellevue and the rest of the Regional Advisory Council and entities that are involved in East Trail. One is how we've been focusing on legislative priorities, how we can think about governmental funding for some of the big gaps and needs that we have with East Trail projects. And so going into last year, East Trail Partners really worked to identify opportunities in both federal and state budget processes that would fit different East Trail projects and really set this effort up for possible funding for different projects. So we work directly with RAC entities, so council members and staff, to identify priorities for the corridor that both fit those budget processes at the federal and state levels, and also met the needs of different entities and what this trail needs along its 42 miles. In August, along with our partners, we put on a virtual Experience the East Trail event for federal delegation staffers. A lot of you all in the Bellevue City Council were able to join, so thank you all for the time there. But it was really an opportunity to bring this, this effort to life and to really share the many benefits that, this trail and investing in this trail, bringing federal dollars to this effort, will do for the region. So again, I think folks, both corporate partners and federal delegation staffers, left with just a much bigger sense of what the East Trail can do for our communities and for our region, and what funding from the federal options will help support. With that, we also built relationships with some of the major East Side focused corporations and nonprofits, and put together a letter that really shows the broad-based support from the non-governmental sector as well for East Trail and for funding opportunities. And we're being able to share that at the end, or sort of after the Experience the East Trail event, was just another great way sort of, again, to show this unified approach and support for our trail. And we took a similar approach for the current session in Olympia. So again, working with the Regional Advisory Council members and staff to identify priority projects along the corridor that would fit with state funding mechanisms. And so with the federal, sorry, jumping back real quick, we really look at the federal projects that fit well, or our East Trail projects that fit well with federal funding mechanisms. We've called sort of the bridge projects. 3 or 4 of those are in City of Bellevue. And then with the state level, 2 of the 4 priority projects for the corridor are within Bellevue as well. And it's been great to work with a number of champions on the House of Representatives side in Olympia. And 2 of the 4 projects, or 3 of the 4 projects that we had on sort of our priority list for the state session, have sponsors at the House. And so will be worked into the House of Representatives transportation bill as they try to work that through down there. So again, really excited to be able to bring a unified voice to this work, and to also be working with entities like yourselves to think about how can we approach some funding mechanisms for some of these larger projects. You can go ahead and flip to the next one. And I'm also really excited to talk about the Northup Way project. Last fall, East Trail Partners was thrilled to announce that REI and Facebook, their commitment to the trail in $1 million each in direct investment in East Trail. And our role was really working with them to help them understand, here are different priorities and needs along the corridor, here are different ways that your investment will make a difference. And sharing a number of different lenses for how they could consider how their investment could be placed. And also took time to learn of their priorities, how they're thinking about community access to green space, regional trail network, and also how they're thinking about getting employees around. It's definitely a topic of conversation with Sound Transit, as well as folks are going to be coming back to offices, and how are we thinking about transportation options for getting folks around. So with those conversations, REI Co-op and Facebook really identified the Northup Way Connector as a project they wanted their investment to fund. It's estimated a $2.5 million project, and so it left us with about a $500,000 gap in funding. And this is where the magic of public-private partnership really comes into play, in that the King County Council was able to go, well, we've got to make sure that we make this happen. And Council Chair Balducci was able to come in with last-in funding. So we have a fully funded project at this point. You can go ahead into the next slide. So I wanted to throw some photos up there so folks have a sense of the project. But the aerial on the left, the orange line is the East Trail, and the blue is the ramp. So it'll be that connector from the East Trail to the higher grade 520 trail that goes east-west. And this is just, northern Bellevue, just north of Spring District, and the light rail station going in there. So just an incredibly important connection for how we think about alternative transportation options, and also how we think about, just community members being able to get around. So again, this is one of our roles as an organization, is to facilitate this kind of investment, to build those relationships with some of our East Side businesses, to be thinking of, to help them think about how they're getting their folks around, but also, what this resource means for all of the communities along the East Side. We're currently in process with King County on an agreement to how we're going to get this project started and done. So really exciting to have just a neat and new opportunity in terms of another project that's going to be moved along a little bit faster and a little more immediately. So those were sort of the two big pieces I wanted to share today. I want to make sure that there's opportunity for questions, and Kurt's got more in terms of details on some of the other projects that are happening in Bellevue that are also very exciting.
Sounds great. Thank you, Catherine. So, as Joyce mentioned, it's getting to be much more fun to start doing these updates and talking about East Trail projects in Bellevue. And that's because things are starting to really get real. Sometimes it feels like as we move through these things, there isn't much visible progress, but that's going to change very quickly. Things are definitely moving forward. And if we stay on track, 2021 is going to be a very exciting year. And we're very excited to see that happen for the East Trail. In late spring, we expect the new paved trail south of I-90 to open to the public. The Northeast 8th Overcrossing is scheduled to go to bid in April and begin construction in late summer. And the Wilburton Trestle is planned to go to bid by the end of the year. That's a lot for 2021, and it's a big progress for our project. It's been a huge effort by our team and our partners, and I really want to echo what Peter said and what Councilmember Lee also mentioned. Bellevue is a great jurisdiction to work with to get these projects done. Without the kind of staff support and the support from council all the way up and down, we would not be where we are, and we really appreciate that, and being able to get everything done from our permitting to our coordination, and it's really been a great functional relationship for us. So if we could go to the next slide, I'm going to run through some familiar projects, but hopefully some real updates that show some progress. And this one is the one we can see the most progress on. It's muddy, but where I used to be just showing renderings and plans for our WashDOT partnership south of I-90, now we have an actual graded trail in place. You can imagine paving and railings going in. And this should be a wonderful new addition to our trail network when it opens, hopefully at the early part of May. It may be mid-May, but it's been a little bit of a rainy January. Next slide, please. So the paved trail, it should open May 1st from Renton to Coal Creek Parkway. Active construction is ongoing. We're in, unfortunately, that section of construction where it's not great to be a neighbor of a construction project, but that should be over fairly soon. And then the second part of the project, the I-405 crossing with a new bridge at the Wilburton Gap, will follow on after that and begin construction in 2021 to open in 2023. Next slide. For the Northeast 8th Overcrossing, I'd like to thank Mr. Rogoff's great staff for providing this photo. I'm happy to say that I think the East Trail goes right to the base of that rainbow out there. Okay, but this is getting very real. So, here we are taking a photo from the Wilburton station, looking down, and our bridge on the north side of Northeast 8, the Overcrossing, will be landing exactly in that muddy patch between Sturtevant Creek and the Whole Foods parking lot there, and then continue north, connecting past the OMFE for Sound Transit, and then continuing on north through Kirkland and eventually to Woodinville and beyond. So this is getting very real. Next slide, please. We expect to go to bid in April 2021. The design is 100% complete. We're just finishing our final acquisitions and permitting. Those are the things that really could have a little bit of budget, schedule risk there, but we're very close. And of course, our big goal is that the whole project will be open to public before Sound Transit passenger service begins, coming up in 2023. Next slide. We're really excited with the way the design has progressed since the last time you saw it. This is a view looking down the bridge as you're walking across. That artwork that you see to the right on the east side of the bridge is just a placeholder. That will actually be one of the locations where the Japanese American Heritage commemoration will be. So the entire bridge, as we cross on that side, will have artwork and interpretive and commemorative materials that speak to that Japanese American agricultural heritage in this area. And then there'll be a second location also on the far side of the bridge at the North Mixing Zone that tells the story of the actual packing house that was located at where the current Sound Transit station is. Next slide, please. We're really pleased with the way the design has been progressing for the decorative cladding. And we think it's going to be a real ornament to the neighborhood as the rest of the Wilburton neighborhood grows up around us and the station. Next slide. So we, as Warren mentioned, we're really thrilled that through a lot of very, very hard work from the community and the Eastside Heritage Center and the steering committee that's been guiding this project, we were able to get the Japanese American Agricultural Heritage commemoration into the contract. It's not coming later. It's ready to go and will be delivered as part of the project. The cladding is still in the project, and we like the way it's going, and we've been able to incorporate night lighting to really show it off at its best. And of course, there'll be interior lighting on the bridge for extended use so that folks can get to and from the station safely, even in the dark hours of our commutes when we're all commuting again. Next slide. The Wilburton Trestle is following Northeast 8. We're also making a lot of progress on the design for the trestle, moving towards a 90% design in this case at the end of April. That will set us up to get our permits finalized and prepare to go to bid on that project by the end of the year and begin construction in 2022. Next slide. We anticipate about 18 months, maybe 20 months of construction. So we're hoping that sometime near late 2023, fall of 23, the trestle will be open. It'll connect to the new bridge crossing 405 and get us from the east side to the west side of 405 and connect into Bellevue and allow for folks to put all those pieces together to head from the north side to the south side of the East Trail. Next slide. We're still making a lot of progress. You can see that there's lighting incorporated into our railing. Our designs for the overlooks are moving forward. All the detailing of how the safety railing is going to work, how the tread is going to work, what those viewpoints are going to look like are all getting worked out and getting ready to move into the bid package. Next slide. And we're also very pleased that the lighting system that we're looking at is very low profile. It'll provide effective lighting so folks can feel confident and safe on top of the trestle, but also won't end up spilling over the trestle, and so it won't detract from the historic character of the trestle or really be that visible from down below as you move forward. Next slide. We're going to have the viewpoints and interpretive signing. We're really excited about some distinctive railing, benches, and signage options that we'll share with staff as those start to become finalized if folks are interested. We're really focusing on the historic railroad character of the trestle. This is going to be the place where we think people can really understand that this was a railroad corridor, that this was a really substantial and important piece of railroad infrastructure, and kind of get into that historic part of it. And ultimately meet all of our shared expectations for what we hope will be, expect will be an exceptional new landmark for the trail. So we're really feeling like these pieces are coming together, and all the things we've been talking about for years and years now, we're going to start to see some real progress and real projects getting built in construction and then open to the public coming up in 22. And then following on. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. That's a great presentation. I'll call on people in this order: Councilmember Stokes, Lee, Deputy Mayor Barksdale, Robertson, Zahn, and then me. So Councilmember Stokes, would you like to start us off?
Yes, okay, got it. Yeah, appreciate it very much. This is very exciting. This has been, I mean, there've been a lot of very memorable and fun things to do on council for the last several years, but this one kind of takes the cake. It's an amazing partnership, and it shows how regional cooperation and collaboration can achieve amazing results. And it's a combination of both the public and private partnership has been mentioned, and having the East Rail partners kind of evolve out of that, and Catherine coming here and really helping us put this whole thing together is just, again, amazing. So I really appreciate that. And also, we've had fantastic support from staff, and Lacey Jane and Joyce have really helped on this whole project. But it's something that I feel very proud of, that Bellevue has been a strong member of the relationship. And we started out because we didn't own the properties and other cities did. We were kind of the second rank, members, but we all worked together on that and said, look, we're all together. And they recognize that we're putting a lot of money into it. And the Bellevue corridor is a really kind of the backbone of the whole thing. So it's exciting to see these things come forward. I mean, all of the, pieces. I don't want to go back over all these things that have been talked about because it's just amazing they're coming together, and the timing. And I remember back when I was mayor, I think it was 2006, I guess 17, 16, whenever the leap year was, but we had a groundbreak or breaking with the Wilburton Trestle. Dow Constantine was here, and Claudia and a lot of other people, a big crowd up just down the street from where I live, down there by the trestle. And Dow made this promise that we would have this done by leap year. And I told him we'd hold him to that. Well, we're going to be real close. And I think that's, given everything, is amazing. So the other thing that's fantastic about this trail is not just the trail itself, the East Rail itself, and all the things that it can, bring to walking along that and everything else, but it has really brought together the community in many, many ways. And, the Northrop connection connects with things we're doing in trails within, Bellevue, and it's going to be a real boost to and a big part of the Grand Connection. it's going to be something that's going to let people walk back and forth all over the city. And we have the, working on the connections with the botanical gardens and all these other things that are happening. So it's just one of these amazing things that that this region has come together on, and the city's working with us and the private sector. So I'm just really pleased to hear it coming along, and appreciate King County's strong work in moving it forward. And for the other cities, everybody, contributing and collaborating. And because of all of that, we're going to get this thing done when a lot of people thought, well, it's going to be, 10 years before we do this. So we're going to get it done. So thanks very much for the presentation, and I'm looking forward to the next meeting. And it's just been a pleasure with this group. And I'm looking forward to getting this completed. And it's just another thing that will make Bellevue an even greater place where you want to be. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a great looking project. I'm very impressed. Kurt, from King County, I think that you said it right, that working with different jurisdictions, you find out that working together is really a key how to make a project successful. And I appreciate the Israel partners. That's another, I believe, community organization that really brings the people to work on something very, very focused. And I think that's how things can succeed. But the biggest thing to me, this project, is to bring people together. I mean, the rail itself is just but a rail. It's a rail that's been dug up and with a pathway that connects from somewhere to somewhere. However, this thing that it's developed because of the individual cities have people within each city, each community that has a story to tell, that has a uniqueness, that has something that can be shared with other folks. So I think this path has been an opportunity, with the rail going away, and this rail trestle has been here for I don't know how many years. Occasionally there's a train goes by, that's it. But now, with a piece of dirt, basically, connecting people all the way from Renton all the way to north, even beyond, hopefully. I don't know how far it goes. But it depends on our creativity. I imagine, how each jurisdiction at each location is interested to connect. It's the people that need to be connected. And I think this shows that we do have a lot of great stories, and the people living in each city in the King County region are very interested to connect, to work together, to learn about each other. It's stories, histories, and then based on that, we are connecting the past to present. Their businesses now, Bellevue is different from used to be. Renton is different. I'm sure Kirkland, they're all different. However, we are being connected, and then we'll continue to do so. And the way it's done, it's just done very nicely. I have to compliment, looking at this for the first time. And it tells for Bellevue itself, which I can say something about. I'm sure each city has its story to tell, uniqueness. For Bellevue, I think we're telling Bellevue's part of the history, the Japanese Americans and the agriculture community. And we want to relate to the Bellevue's past. And then how does it, work with the current, and the future lies ahead of us. And I think this is great. I think this really provides a connection, a relationship. People use the word bridge. In this case, it's a bridge. And I think makes it work is because the effort people are putting in now, making it fun, making it for the family, making it relevant. I think this is what makes it work. So I think it's wonderful project, and hopefully it will continue to evolve, continue to bring more and more people with stories, with history, with connection from each city, and then they can connect together. This is what it's all about. Good job. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Noonhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll add to the to the gush parade here. But first of all, Catherine, Warren, and Kurt, thank you so much for being here tonight. Great presentation. And thank you to past and current council members like Councilmember Stokes and Lee that have been a part of this. And, you know, it certainly helps when we've got Council Chair Belducci when she comes before us. This is one of her favorite projects. So that's always great to hear as well. And boy, I cannot wait to you know, be a part of this opening and to be on this trail all the way from Renton up to Kirkland. It's just going to be so fantastic. And you know, as the mayor said, you know, guaranteed jobs need guaranteed transportation options. So this is another really important piece of that, as well as just the great connection to all these other projects like the Grand Connection that was mentioned as well. And also just the way the community that has really just ignited energy and excitement around this project as well. And as they start to see more and more of these designs and as they come to fruition and actually become a reality, it's just going to be a really exciting time to provide this mode of transportation, be it walking, biking, et cetera, in Bellevue and connecting all of our neighboring cities. So kudos all around. I had two quick questions for you. So one, being a cyclist, I'm kind of curious what kind of material on the trestle you're looking at to ensure that it's kind of a non-slip type of material, especially in the winter months, so things can start getting very slippery. And also, if I heard you correctly, you know, you did say that the trestle, and could not agree more, is kind of an epic, iconic centerpiece part of the city. But then I think I also heard that you were going to use muted lighting, and I was wondering if it's not too late to amp the lighting, you know, lighting in which you can see the you know, the trestle from you know, somewhat far away. Not that we want to disturb neighbors or folks, but you know, it's just such an iconic part of the city. You know, we want people to be able to see this at night, and with the lighting, it could be just something really, really special. So I don't know if you can comment on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So for the first question, we're also very concerned that people that it has really good non-slip, good tread. We've in many of our historic trestles, we have used a precast concrete panels with a high grip surface on the top. And that's what we're going to be using here too. They're going to be a little bit, the trestle is special in a lot of ways. It's wider, it's bigger. So they're going to be a little different than what we use on other ones, but we anticipate it's going to be a really pleasant surface to cycle, walk, wheelchair to get across. And we're also going to be on this trestle, doing some special patterning on the surface so that the parts of the deck right next to the railings are clearly delineated as places for people to stand and be and not have to worry about cyclists being in that space. So,
very good.
So we're working on that. We have not thought about like uplighting of the trestle or trying to light that 1,000-foot long, 100-foot high historic structure. That might have to be a future conversation. So we focused on safety lighting for folks moving across it, but yeah, we are. I mean, I am very pleased that we're able to do some, I think very attractive night lighting on the Northeast 8th Bridge, but nothing on the trestle yet.
Okay, maybe something for future consideration. Thanks, Kurt.
Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Looking forward to this one too, similar, the environmental and community benefits. I think I'm really excited for the views. I remember when Bradley, when he was with the city and other staff had put on the Tactical Urbanism event as part of the kickoff for the Warburton CAC, and just the view of the skyline. I mean, I think it would encourage people to just take the East Trail just to be able to see some of those views along it. So I'm excited about it and look forward to being able to ride it one day as well. So thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll join my colleagues in their excitement. This is going to be great. And you know, I think King County's been thanked. I want to thank King County for being such a good partner in this. But I also wanted to thank the voters, because without the voters having passed the last King County Park levy, we wouldn't be doing this project, certainly not on this schedule. So, and a lot of people in Bellevue and throughout the county voted for that. So that's really great. And, you know, this, as people have said, this is, it's a great recreation corridor. It's a great transportation corridor. It's a placemaking idea that will connect with our Grand Connection, but it also is part of making our community livable. And like any fixed transportation corridor that's going to carry a lot of people, we will have development that's oriented. It'll be a different kind of TOD. It'll be trail oriented development, but that's already happening. The properties along this corridor are getting really, particularly the commercial properties, are getting really excited about how they can provide amenities to the people using corridor and how the people using the corridor can access their property. So I think that that's going to be really great. And the partnership with REI and Facebook, I mean, you know that it's a good project when you have, you know, that public-private partnership and all these different, the cities partnering as well with the county. So it's great. I am wondering, the one question I have is whether you happen to have a pocket slide with you that would show the image, an image of the design of the 405 crossing. I would love to see that. I haven't seen it for a while.
I don't, but I can provide an update for it. Particularly the interesting image is more the plan view, I think, of how the trail fits in there, and we can send a current version of that your way.
That would be great. How wide is it going to be?
It's quite wide. I don't remember exactly how much. It's there's about a maximum of about 6 feet of planting on each side of the trail. It's a little bit of a wedge because the trail crosses it at an angle with another 14 feet of paving in between. So it's running, it's 30 plus feet wide. It's going to, I hope, feel very generous and very comfortable for trail users as they make that crossing.
Great. Yeah. And I saw a lot of designs as it was getting chosen. And I think we weighed in that we wanted the one with the most landscape, most park-like feel. But I hadn't actually seen a follow-up of what it's actually going to be built. So I would love to see that. That would be really exciting. And then I just wanted to give a thanks to Councilmember Stokes. He's been representing Bellevue on this committee for a long time, and we know he's been doing a great job. So thank you, John, for that.
Great. Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, so I want to join my colleagues in thanking Councilmember Stokes and Lee for working on this project along with the county. You know, this is the epitome of a successful partnership. I actually remember all the way back to when the Port of Seattle stepped forward to purchase this section so that we actually can, over the last dozen years, get to the point where we're at. So very, very exciting times. You know, I think about the fact that this is going to be that multimodal where when we talk about connected and protected lanes for people, this is what we're talking about. And so to me, super excited about the fact that it's going to create safety, better for environment, to be able to offer the multimodal for both recreational and our commuters. I think about what you mentioned with the historic character of the trestle and being able to provide that. And then a slightly different experience in Northeast 8th with the Japanese Heritage Commemoration. So I think those are really special. I will say that I'll echo other council members that having a really wide trestle will be important. Those of us that have vertigo will probably be in the middle and not necessarily hanging out near the railings on the edge and looking down. And so being able to have that possibility. I was reminded of being in New York City and walking the High Line Trail, and just the fact that even in January, the level of people walking up there and the activation of those spaces in the adjacent areas is going to be so exciting. I read that fiber optics is one that we are pursuing. So I think that will help really activate that space. And I can't help though, but ask one question, which is the I-90 Steel Bridge seems to be an orphan that's still to be adopted. And I bring it up like that because certainly Northrop, right, we have money from REI and Facebook. And yet when I look at the whole corridor, it does seem like that one area is a pretty big lift. So I know you talked about doing some budget funding advocacy. Can you comment on that particular section? And then I'm wondering, if we did have funding, who would be the lead agency to make sure that happens? And it's especially special to me because it's, you know, kind of right in the middle, and it seems like you're not going to get all the way across if you don't have that section in the middle.
Bert, do you want me to take first stab at this?
Sure. Yeah, Catherine, you take the lead. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's a great question. And without a doubt, the I-90 Steel Bridge it's one of the unfunded projects. It's also, when we think about connecting South King County to the rest of the trail, to North King County, Snohomish, I mean, it is the key to a fully connected trail. I also think it's incredibly important as we think about equity and connecting South King County, both the regional trail system down there and employees thinking about getting to work and to jobs. So that project is the one project that is on both the state ask priorities and our federal priorities. If we get funding in one bucket, then we'll take it off sort of the list of the others. So it fits well with the sort of the theme of bridge projects for a federal ask. And it crosses an interstate, you know, so that also really helps position all those bridge projects for sort of a large federal ask. In Olympia, Representative Slatter, who's in 48, so the I-90 Steel Bridge isn't actually in her district, but she's sort of been the champion at the state level for East Trail since the beginning, and she's on the transportation committee. So it was really important for her to sponsor that in the House transportation package. So that's sort of the process where things stand at the House level in Olympia, is that we have the representatives have been able to sponsor that as they start building out the transportation package in Olympia. So really excited to have sort of her sponsorship and her championship of the East Trail in general and that project. I know that she worked closely with Representative Tai on who was going to own what pieces, but that project and is one of the ones that is now getting built into that budget through their work.
Well, that's great. And I'm wondering if maybe similar to BRT, where we sent a letter to Olympia advocating for the BRT corridor, whether for the I-90 bridge, we could do something similar with the cities along the corridor, because you're not going to get all the way from the north to the south without it. And I do think it is an equity issue for folks being able to live in South King County and be able to take that up to Bellevue for jobs. Thank you.
Well, everybody has said so many good comments. I just am amazed at how effective your organization has been, East Trail Partners, in keeping this vision going, keeping the momentum and getting that funding. What a tough job that is, and yet you're doing it. And this is a real gift to the community, this project. I am personally so excited to see this finished because I ride along there all the time, and the alternative right now is riding under the trestle, which is not a fun ride. So it'll be great to get this done. Two things, you know, part of our council vision statement is embracing the future while respecting our past. And this is a great part of respecting our past. That trestle, I think it was built in like 1904 originally. And I believe the lake level was not lowered until 12 years later. So a lot of people don't realize that the Mercer Slough went all the way under there, I believe, through to Factoria. And then the Lake Hills connector, which cut through there, didn't happen until the 70s. So I hope that on the trestle, we get some really good history of how this originally looked, because with the lowering of the lake and then that street going through, it really changed the landscape. And then going off of what Councilmember Zahn was saying about the I-90 bridge, you know, everything I hear from the residents of Bellevue is please leave it the way it is. They love the graffiti. I know there's probably a lot of lead paint on there. So maybe you need to seal it or something, but a lot of people are really happy with it. It's like the only piece of what am I trying to say? I want to say grudge. It's not grudge. I forgot the word, but anyway, run down like Gasworks Park that we have in Bellevue. So people really want to keep that, preserve that. And, you know, I think of how T-Mobile employees are going to really benefit from the Mountains to Sound Greenway and how that connects to that area. And so maybe it could be the T-Mobile bridge or something, but just a thought. But thank you for all the work you're doing. I know you're hardly getting going, really, even though you've been working so hard, but the momentum is there, and I think the rest of it's going to go quite quickly. So we're very excited. Thank you.
It's grunge.
What is it? Grunge. Grunge. That's it. I forgot the M. Grunge. Thank you.
Grunge.
Okay. So we have Joyce doing regional issues, and this was printed in your packet. We don't usually allow enough time, I think, for this. And I did ask Joyce, since at 5 o'clock today, she got some results of some of the legislation that we are tracking as a city. So I asked her if she might give us an overview update. And then if you have any comments or questions, I can see you just raise your hand when she's done. So Joyce, go ahead.
Okay, well, after tonight, we will have passed another cutoff, which is a deadline in the legislative process. And this cutoff is in order for bills to remain under consideration for the rest of the session, they have to be passed out of the fiscal committees in their respective chambers. So those are the appropriations, Ways and Means committees. In order for them to stay in consideration. And the only bills that are exempt from this particular cutoff are the ones that are deemed necessary to implement the budget. And they abbreviate that NTIB. So whenever you hear NTIB, you know it's a budget bill, it has a budget impact, and those bills remain alive for the remainder of the session. Once the tonight passes, the action shifts now from the committees in each chamber over to the floor of each chamber. So the House will be passing bills and, you know, passing or not passing bills, and the Senate will be doing the same. And the next cutoff that we face is on March 9. And that's the cutoff for bills to be approved and make it out of their House of origin. And that means that House bills have to pass the House, and Senate bills have to pass the Senate. And ones that do remain alive for the rest of the session. Ones that don't are dead, but bills that are dead are often resurrected somewhere along the way. So it's never dead until the gavel goes down on the last day of session. We watch them throughout. We'll probably have a full list of bills, or at least a more full list of bills that remain alive and what bills died by the end of this week. But what we know so far, and I've tried to align the bills that I'm mentioning with the city's priorities. And one of the priorities we had was having an economic recovery plan from the pandemic. And 2 bills were signed by the governor. One was Senate Bill 5061, that's 5061. And that was recently signed. And what it does is it prevents a $1.7 billion automatic increase in the unemployment insurance tax that was supposed to go into effect in April. And the effect of this is it helps employers to reduce their tax liability. So that is really important for businesses and agencies and others that are responsible for paying unemployment insurance taxes. The other bill that the governor just signed very recently was House Bill 1368. And that's the bill that the House and Senate in the state approved, and it appropriates the $2.2 billion that we're receiving as a state from the federal government. And these are pandemic relief funds, and they were passed by Congress late last year. And this House bill that was signed by the governor provides where that funding will be spent in the state. And there's a fairly exhaustive list in your packet tonight of where that funding will go, but it primarily will help with childcare costs, rent and food assistance, which is very much needed, medical and healthcare assistance, education, behavioral health programs, testing and vaccine distribution, and funding for grants to businesses. And again, if you want more detail, it's in the agenda memo. Another council priority was our support for tax increment financing. And tax increment financing is referred to as TIF, and it's an economic development tool that captures some of the value of the appreciated value of tax that comes about because property values are increased, and you generate funding to provide infrastructure benefits for a designated area. Right now, this tool is not allowed under state law because there's a constitutional provision about the gift of public funds. And so what's happening is there's a coalition that was formed around this issue. They're meeting, and it's good to note that the two bills that have to do with tax increment financing, House Bill 1189 and Senate Bill 5211, are both waiting for a vote on the floor of their respective House. The bills are very comparable. They're not exactly the same, but they're very comparable to each other. And just getting that issue across the finish line would be a very big deal for the state of Washington. In the arena of transportation investments, both of the chambers at the state legislature have released their framework for a new revenue package for statewide transportation funding. And right now, legislators, it was referred to by Catherine Hollis earlier, each chamber is working on the list of projects that would accompany a transportation package. And the transportation packages they propose different tools to get enough money assembled to fund a massive list of what is basically infrastructure issues, mostly roads in the state. It's very much needed. It's very competitive. And we've been working with our lobbyist and the chamber's lobbyist and the lobbyists of other stakeholder groups that support our priority projects. And we're working with those folks to ensure that they are going to be supportive of our projects. As I said, it's going to be very competitive. And so far, our legislators have been very receptive to supporting our particular projects. There's still quite a bit of time left in the legislature for these lists to form and to gel. And we're going to have to be on top of making sure that people's support holds for our projects. There are lots of bills in the legislature that are problematic for one reason or another. And one is a transportation bill, and it's Senate Bill 5232. And this is the bill that would remove the authority that was granted in 2019 for WashDOT to bond the toll revenues from Interstate 405 and the State Route 167 corridor. Those both have express toll lanes or hot lanes, and the decision was made in 2019 to expand the use of tolls, authorize the use of tolls on 405 between Bellevue and Renton, and to bond the toll revenue for the whole corridor plus the 167 corridor. One of the things that's happened, as you are certainly aware, is that the COVID-19 pandemic has created incredible problems. Traffic patterns have changed completely from what they were pre-pandemic. Toll revenue is coming in very, very, very low. And these traffic patterns and toll revenues are not expected to pick up for some time to reach pre-pandemic levels. This is of great concern because the state cannot issue bonds to fund projects and then not have the means by which they would pay those bonds off. And so there's a reluctance by some folks in the legislature to continue the authorization for tolling, or excuse me, for bonding the toll revenue. This bill passed out of the Senate Transportation Committee, and it's being considered a work in progress. It's also necessary to implement the budget, so it's going to be around till the end of session. And they're looking at a way to put in some triggering language that would say, at such time as the pandemic has eased and people come back and the toll revenue picks up, how would those funds then be used to fill the gap and be able to create enough revenue as a source to repay bonds if they were able to bond against the toll revenue. And then, as noted in the Sound Transit presentation tonight, projects that are at the end of Interstate 405 at the north end, there are some fixes that need to be made there. And there is not money because the revenue from the tolls was going to fund those projects. And with the toll revenue in such decline, there isn't funding for those projects. The legislature says it's committed to finding funds to fill that gap. The danger for us is you combine this issue with the potential inability to bond toll revenue when it returns to a normal rate. And if they're going to backfill the projects at the north end of 405 in order to keep them on schedule, how is that backfill going to happen? Will they say, well, we're backfilling your projects, so you'll get fewer projects in the big list of transportation, of the transportation package. So there's a lot of issues kind of swimming around here together. And we're sorting through them, and we're meeting with legislators, and we're trying to get people to commit to meeting the commitments they made on the 405 project at the north end, in addition to not penalizing the east side potentially by subtracting that amount of money from a potential revenue package for new revenue. It's a bit of a dilemma. And as we get more information, we will share it with council. We're certainly on our toes about this one. And moving on to the affordable housing, homelessness, and human services arena. As you remember, House Bill 1590 passed in the 2020 session, and that's the bill that authorized cities and counties, either or, to impose a 0.1% increase in the local sales tax for the funding for affordable housing and homelessness projects and some services that go with those supportive services. There were a few things in that bill that needed to be clarified. One of which was we want to make sure that the language and the intent of House Bill 1590 gets clarified in House Bill 1070, which is this session. And we want them to say without a doubt and very clearly that you can use this funding to provide for the acquisition, purchase of an existing building that you would then use for affordable housing, homelessness, and supportive services. And that bill is still alive, and we've been watching it closely and trying to be very supportive. There are a lot of bills in the affordable housing, homelessness, and human services arena that are still alive and are being amended as they go through. So it's kind of impossible to tell you at this moment which parts of the bills are good and which are bad, because they're all being tweaked as they move through the process. But the bills about providing foreclosure support, tenant protections, and landlord assistance for when the eviction moratorium ends or is lifted, increasing the document recording fee by $100 to fund rental assistance and other support services to help prevent evictions, authorizing the establishment of housing benefit districts for cities and counties, and local option short-term rental tax. Those are all still alive and they're moving through their respective chambers. Another big body of bills, just the sheer number, have to do with social and criminal justice reform, which was another council priority. And several proposals are still alive that would create new use of force standards for police and law enforcement. And many of these bills are getting amended along the way. Many of them are still alive. There is one bill in particular that is not good, and I would say almost all cities are opposing it, and it's House Bill 1202. And that bill would create a civil cause of action for a person who's injured by a law enforcement officer. The bill's been amended and it's been linked to another bill, which is House Bill 1310, that would include language that would provide a law enforcement officer with a defense against those kinds of actions if the officer substantially was compliant with the training that he or she had received. The bill also is problematic in that it has a $4.3 million per year fiscal note, and there's questions about whether or not this could be funded. And there is a clause in the bill that says the bill's null and void unless funding is attached to it. There were bills also in the law enforcement arena that would have overhauled the collective bargaining process for law enforcement contracts, and those bills have died. In the environment, there are still lots of bills that are alive and moving. The low carbon fuel standard bill, which is Senate Bill 5126, is still moving, and that bill would set emissions limits on facilities and fuel suppliers that would support the state's goal to reduce greenhouse gases. And then the governor's cap and invest bill has been amended, and it's also deemed necessary to implement the budget, so it's still alive. And the revised version of that bill has some positive news in it because it would dedicate, I think it's around $650 million to transportation projects. And that's good news if you're looking for money that will provide funding for a new revenue transportation package. That's as quick a summary as I was able to gather today. And we've got a lot of work ahead of us because we're not even at the midpoint of the session. So that next cutoff on March 9th is going to be a real big one. That's when the House bills go over to the Senate to be heard and the Senate bills go over to the House. And then you are kind of on the home stretch because toward the end of the session, the budgets will come out, the transportation package, there should be a little bit of settling on what projects will be on that list and how those projects will be funded and who's really going to support those projects and the increased taxes that go along with them. So we will just keep tracking bills and letting you know their status as we find out. And there, needless to say, will be opportunities, especially in the transportation arena, to be talking to legislators during the rest of the session. But on a sort of a different note, at the beginning of the session, we talked about the fact that it was going to be conducted almost entirely virtually. And that has had some pluses and some minuses. Some of the pluses have been that people from around the state don't have to drive to Olympia in order to provide their comments and their opinions to members of the legislature. So that's been kind of a good result. One of the things that's been difficult and challenging during the session is that many of you who have gone down to Olympia in years past, you know that the hallway conversations are really important. There's a time when you can't get, time on a legislator's calendar, but you can catch them while they're in a committee meeting and they can step out in the hallway and talk to you for a few minutes and you can get your messages across. The hallway meetings aren't happening. The committee poll meetings are not happening. And what is happening is the major part of those folks' days are taken up with hearings and commitments that keep them literally in front of their screen, just like we are now. So their time is limited, and it's been difficult to get those 15-minute to half-hour meetings with legislators to say, here's progress, here's what we'd like to see on a whole spate of bills and our interests. So we've had to hone our messages this session down to, the elevator speech for everything because there just isn't time. And we expect that this will just be amplified as we continue to move through the session. There's not much we can do about that. The good news is our legislators have been incredibly receptive. They take the calls from our lobbyists. They take the calls from you when you've tried to contact them. So the good news is they're receptive. They're just incredibly busy.
Great. Well, thank you, Joyce. Anybody have questions or comments? Not seeing any. I'm going to give us a short break and see if we can come back at 8:30. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce this topic, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. This is the last study session topic on your agenda this evening, and it is on the 2020 year-end fourth quarter economic development update. Just by way of background, we provide these updates to you quarterly, and the last one that was provided to you on this particular topic was back in November of 2020. Tonight's presentation is informational. It is also an opportunity for the council members to ask questions as we progress through the presentation. With that, I am going to hand it over to Jessica Nato, our Chief Economic Development Officer, and accompanying him is Philly Marsh, Economic Development Manager. So Jesse, it's all yours.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of Council. We're looking forward to tonight's presentation and discussion on the economic development activities for the last quarter. As a way of introduction, as you may remember, the Council did adopt the updated economic development plan in November of last year. So this presentation will continue our transition over to the new strategic areas in that document. So tonight is again for information only, no specific direction or action is requested. And way of kind of providing an overarching theme for tonight. Tonight's presentation will continue many of the themes from 2020, including a bit of that tale of two cities where we have a office and construction and national retail market that is doing extremely well, while in parallel we have local restaurants and entertainment businesses and hospitality industry that continues to suffer from the prolonged pandemic. One of the good notes I'll note as we engage with our businesses, large and small across the city, is that Bellevue's stability, predictability, and partnership culture continue to be core strengths and reasons that we are reinforcing our pro-business and business-friendly ecosystem. And with that, I will hand it over to Philly.
Jesse. Just as a reminder, this is a focus on both our business attraction and marketing efforts, as well as our business retention and expansion, which are ongoing programs, but also the start of our new ED plan implementation with our 6 new focus areas. And those areas will be start to get weaved into these updates. To start off with a year in review, 2020 was a year like none other, and some of the major projects that we were able to accomplish was the adoption of that economic development plan with our 6 new focus areas, and then really the focus with the response to COVID. And we really worked with our partners across the board to come together and provide the best assistance for our businesses and our economy. And some of those projects that we are most proud of include the Restart Up 425 Business Assistance Program that provided one-on-one technical assistance to small businesses in accessing those financial resources, as well as our business relief grants, which we'll give a detailed update on later in the presentation. Our outdoor dining program to help restaurants with expanded dining, and then the ADA Heart of Bellevue program, working with them to profile businesses and give our residents a reason to get out and shop and support those businesses that were suffering. You know, looking ahead, I think you've heard this a couple of times through tonight's meeting. We're cautiously optimistic. While there is some hope on the horizon, and holistically, Bellevue has weathered the pandemic better than some of our peer cities. We're not quite yet out of the woods, and we're going to continue to diligently monitor trends, as well as track and communicate resources and opportunities for our hardest hit industries. And like Joyce mentioned just before this, on Friday, Governor Jay Inslee signed House Bill 1368, which appropriates the $2.2 billion in federal funding. And that does include $240 million for business assistance grants. So we'll be tracking how those funds will be rolled out and make sure that that is communicated to our small business community. And also it's $50 million in childcare and $91 million for income assistance, including $65 million for relief for the state's immigrant population. So all things that we're tracking and impact our work. Looking at the yearly performance metrics for 2020, unfortunately, due to the pandemic and travel restrictions, trade shows and investment missions came to a halt. We were involved in a Korean delegation prior to the pandemic, and thank you, Mayor Robinson, for your participation in the virtual Scottish delegation that happened in December. So while we didn't quite meet the mark on those goals that we set at the beginning of the year in business attraction, we were able to really increase our efforts in business retention and expansion. And this was across major employers, as well as those small businesses that we engaged with over 200 businesses receiving one-on-one deep dive assistance through our programs. So looking at some of our key performance indicators, starting with unemployment, we did see an uptick in our December unemployment numbers. This slide compares Bellevue's unemployment to our national peers. And you can see we were tracking it pretty well, but then did have that spike in December. Bellevue, compared to our regional peers of Tacoma, Seattle, Everett, we still do have the lowest unemployment of those major cities within the region. That December end of year was 5.8%. And pre-pandemic, we were at 2.2%. And then we did see a low in November at 3.5%. So as we see reopening occurring and the second round of PPP loans are being distributed, we're going to be watching this pretty intently and making sure that that number does dip down again. We're also watching it on an industry level because it does help inform some of our workforce efforts moving forward. Looking at commercial real estate, vacancy across the nation is increasing. And as you can see in this graph, Bellevue is not quite experiencing the same sharp uptick that we're seeing in some of our peer sets. Bellevue's central business district started the year with a 4.5% vacancy and ended with 7.3%. But while Class A rates have been holding steady across the board, we all are seeing Class B rates dip from about $38 a square foot to $34. And this actually has created an entry opportunity for some businesses that have been looking to break into the Bellevue market and before were priced out because there wasn't vacancy and the price was too high. And we've had conversations, particularly with many art and cultural organizations about opportunities here in Bellevue. So we're staying in really close communication with commercial brokers, and they do share that the long-term optimism for the future of the East Side office market is still strong. The optimism has not diminished. And we continue to have a really strong development pipeline that is mostly pre-leased. And on the retail side of things, we just got some numbers. And in January, there was 5.3% increase in retail spending. So some good news on that front. And currently the East Side rental vacancy is at 2.7%. So going into visitor trends, as we all know, the tourism and hospitality industry has really struggled through this pandemic. But although slow, we are starting to see some rebound. Hotel occupancy did dip in November, and that was mostly based on the increase in case counts. But early 2021 has seen a strong and growing confidence regarding leisure as well as business travel. And as things are starting to reopen, Visit Bellevue is really starting to focus their investments in earned media, marketing, as well as partnership development to really increase that visitor travel to Bellevue and be that destination of choice. And in fact, Visit Bellevue just released a really great video. Bellevue is safe and open, and it instills that we're resilient and we're committed to excellence and well-being with traveler safety. Great there. So getting into some of our ongoing work, the big success story in the marketing and business attraction efforts is that the Seattle-Tacoma Bellevue metro area broke into the top 10 metro areas. We saw a 5.1% GDP growth, totaling over $382 billion. In King County, it's kind of on the metro area and then measured on the county level. King County actually makes up 77% of that metro area GDP. And if you look at it on the county level, it's 6th in the nation. So a really strong county GDP output. Locally, we're seeing new restaurants as well open, as well as Bellevue companies expand and acquire other companies. So there is some energy here, and then we are continuing to watch, as travel markets continue to open and doing some proactive planning with our partners for some of those outbound and inbound missions, hopefully to take place later this year. So business retention expansion, we had some really great good news stories in 2020 with the renovated T-Mobile headquarters, the exciting news of Amazon and Facebook's expansion. You may have even seen the recent announcement of Bungie, a video game company, more than doubling their Bellevue presence. But a lot of our efforts really did focus on those small businesses, making sure that we were able to provide as many tools and resources as we could to help them weather the pandemic. So using CARES funds and funding allocated from council, we did develop and administer a relief grant. So a total of 296 businesses and organizations applied for this grant, and we were able to award 112 $5,000 grants. And the awarded businesses represent a diverse ownership across the industries that were the most hardest hit through the pandemic. We also prioritized businesses that did not receive other funding options at that time. So as you can see on this slide, 64% of the businesses were female owned, 66% minority owned, and 41% were immigrant and refugee owned. So, and we're continuing to monitor additional relief that currently with the PPP second round, we're providing technical assistance to businesses to access that. We have heard that a lot of businesses who decide not to apply in the first round are now coming back to access that resource. So providing the technical assistance there. We're also working with Startup 425 and some other partners to also provide the business resiliency that is needed for businesses to come out of this pandemic stronger than before. So working with our Startup 425 partners, we're developing a workshop to assist businesses kind of get their foot and be able to build their online presence. So a lot of businesses don't have an online presence. It really posed problematic during this pandemic. So what are the tools and resources we can provide to help them with that? Let's see. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse to talk about some of our workforce development progress.
Thank you, Philly. Workforce was one of the strategic areas that was added as part of the Economic Development Plan update last year. And it continues to be extremely important for two reasons. One is definitely that we continue to see impacts to local workers from the pandemic. And then also that has exacerbated the shortage of qualified workers and the skills gap that was happening before the pandemic. So workforce is more important than ever for Bellevue and our region. As we have been doing our discovery and engagement with partners across the region, we've really started to identify two very, very clear gaps that we're looking into. One will be an analysis of childcare and what is maybe preventing additional childcare options or more affordable childcare options from coming onto the market. And then also we have begun to identify a gap in the ability for residents to successfully navigate the ecosystem of workforce development opportunities that are out there. Much of the funding and resourcing really goes to the actual training programs at Bellevue College and individual boot camps and other providers, but there is not as much resourcing put behind staff that can help make connections between residents and the different programs, or help them understand how to move from one provider to another successfully in a kind of in a pipeline fashion that makes sure that they are engineered for success from the beginning. So because of that particular gap, we're looking at ways to start providing a foundational service that will help residents within Bellevue and others who would like to work for companies or take opportunities at educational providers in Bellevue, help them understand how to navigate that service. And so as part of our work for the second half of last year, Bellevue led a coalition of East Side cities in applying for a grant from the Economic Development Administration, which is a federal agency under the Department of Commerce. And we worked together to bring large employers to the table who really wanted to support this East Side work to provide more of a go big quickly solution in workforce. While unfortunately we were not successful in that grant, the EDA was preferencing geographies that were much larger than the 6 East Side cities we were able to bring into the coalition. The relationships that we built and that discovery is going to be extremely important as we begin to develop this foundational service. And so some of the changes that we will start to see this year are include an update to the city's website that will begin to provide a comprehensive web page, landing page, where folks can come in and see the menu of options that exist within Bellevue and the larger East Side, while we continue to work with our partners to advocate at places like the Workforce Development Council and others to help make sure that resourcing does not miss the East Side, because we do want to make sure that the region recognizes that we do have impacted workers and impacted residents as well. Next slide, please. And tonight we wanted to give you a very brief update on the creative economy. Creative economy is another one of the strategic areas that was added as part of the Economic Development Plan update. And a lot of the work within the creative economy will focus very specifically around the arts district as one of the big moves for the city. We really want to make it an arts and entertainment destination for the region in the eastern half of Bellevue. This ties into issues around quality of life, quality of place, diversity of jobs, and the tourism sector as well. So we are working on a variety of projects to help bring more recognition and resourcing into the arts district in the eastern half of Bellevue. So we will be completing a consultants report in the first half of this year, which will wrap up some community engagement and help us start to understand the landscape of what's going on in Bellevue and how we can help bring the community together in different ways and really catalyze that place and space to be that regional destination for the arts. Some of the things that the council may start to see and the public may start to see popping up include more public art and some creative wraps around the utility boxes within the area to start to identify it as a creative place and space for the city. We're also working with some of our larger employers to identify opportunities for larger murals that can really start to set the tone for the arts district and bring that creativity out onto the streets. We also know that the council has many questions around the broader arts program in the city. So we will be bringing a dedicated update on the arts in Q2 of this year to dive into some of the more public art oriented or public event oriented programs that we are working on. Shelley, back to you.
Thanks, Jesse. Additionally, more detailed updates on partnership will be coming up at a later council presentation, but we did want to briefly share some of the excited work we're getting started on. Our team has been working with the BDA on a series of workshops with major downtown stakeholders, really focused on placemaking and managing the public space downtown. Presentations from nationally leading placemaking organizations have really led to these exciting and engaging conversations about really how Bellevue can continue to build upon itself to be the place businesses and employees want to be. So very timely conversation as we're grappling with this return to work and destination of choice ideas. Additionally, our team has been started work to identify external funding sources and partnerships that can really help support and enhance the implementation of our economic development plan and provide that needed capacity to our partner organizations that we want to work hand in hand with on some of the initiatives. But again, a more detailed update will be coming later this year on those efforts.
And as we bring this presentation in for a landing, we want to make sure that council gets a preview of what's coming for the rest of the year. While I will note that the activities and the impacts of last year, as well as the engagement we're getting from our business community now, have really reinforced the need to really focus on the activation and placemaking for Bellevue, which was very much highlighted and a focus of the new ED plan. That quality of place and those amenities are really needed to help make sure that Bellevue continues to be that destination of choice, that place where residents, workers, and visitors want to be. And you'll see that reflected in the work we're going to be doing this year. One of which will, of course, be the continued relief and support work for our business community as they continue to navigate the pandemic, which will hopefully we'll start to see that light at the end of the tunnel very soon. We'll be working again on the Arts District activation, starting to understand how we can bring events and activities into the public realm in the eastern half of Bellevue so that it becomes that regional arts destination. We'll be doing more, as Philly mentioned, more activation and placemaking work, primarily with our support and with the support of our partners in downtown and Bellevue, where we have those relationships that we can lean on, whether it's bringing back the outdoor dining or looking at ways to bring food trucks and other items to the Spring District to help activate that space. Those will be very important. Our work with small businesses will continue. Startup 425 is working on a host of new programs and trainings that will help reinforce the East Side as a great place for small business. We will continue developing that workforce ecosystem and be looking for additional resourcing opportunities to help do that go big move. And then two of the bigger projects that we didn't touch on earlier in the presentation include the 2021 business survey. So as the council may remember, every odd numbered year, the city conducts a survey, a census style survey of all of the businesses in Bellevue to try and understand trends, issues, and pride points. This year's survey is going to look a little bit different, both in terms of questions and in the responses. We every year try to reserve a number of questions that are going to be timely. So this year we will be asking questions related to the pandemic and its impacts on businesses. And because of the lingering effects and the fact that we are still in the middle of the pandemic, we expect that those response numbers will also dip slightly as we really are surveying the business community in a moment where they continue to experience some pain. So we will be bringing a more detailed report on that business survey to the council in the fall. And then the other item that will be big and launched this year is a citywide retail strategy. This strategy is going to look at the entirety of Bellevue and take a look at gaps and leakage analysis to understand, where does Bellevue really outperform in terms of retail, or where are there spaces or particular products that residents are going outside the city to purchase. So it'll give us a snapshot of our strengths, opportunities for additional placemaking, and also through the engagement with the business community, help us understand if there are any barriers to entry to particular types of retail, so that we can see if we need to address any regulatory or other items that may be preventing additional retail from coming into the city. So that report, that consultant will be onboarded around mid-year, and that should be at least a 9-month project. So we don't expect any large results from that to come until 2022, but we do want to make sure the council understands that that process is underway. And with that, I think we will wrap it up and open up for questions.
We can't hear you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to call on people in this order, starting with Councilmember Lee, Barksdale, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, Councilmember Zahn, Robertson, Stokes, and then myself. So Councilmember Lee, would you like to start us off? I can't hear you now. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to say that I appreciate the report from the economic development staff. It's been a tough year. I think you've been so occupied with the recovery effort, and I think you've done a good job at it. And also, there's a regional effort going on at the same time, very similar to what we're doing, very compatible, consistent. It's figuring out, there's one thing, obviously that's big on everybody's mind, which you didn't emphasize too much, is equity, inclusiveness and all that. But I'm sure, as part of your specific thing that we do, you have to focus on Bellevue, obviously. And you're working on the projects that you started, begun, and you're still working through the process. When things are not happening, what else can you do, right? So your activity is being curtailed, cut back, and all that. It's challenging. But at the same time, I think what I've shown is that you have been making contacts, making connections virtually online. I think that's an opportunity. People want to know that we are in business. We're open for business. And so I think that's a good sign. So I think you're just doing what have you been doing. One other thing I would just quickly comment. I don't know how to do it, but you're still trying to get a lot of information, like the survey you're going to do. My question is, when you get the survey and you're hiring a consultant to do the survey, the key question is, after you get the survey done, what do you do, right? That's the key question. Is there something that we can actually be doing already, preparing? Maybe you're not going to have the most accurate information, but based on what we've already got, based on what we already know, maybe there's some work that we can be actually doing. So when the survey comes in, we can make the corrections, adjustments. We can see what changes we have to make. So that's the only comment I would have to make. That's one. Second is working with regional groups, EDD, PSRC, Greater Seattle Partnership. We may want to make some more concrete connections with them. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing very similar things. They are working at workforce things. They're looking at the tourism industry, retail. So we're doing a lot of things. I'm not saying that we might be duplicating, hopefully not, but I think we should be complementing. So I think the topic is good. We are consistent. So we are communicating with them. The key is what can we do to fold it together, you know, and we can actually give them information they need, and we get information from them what we need. Then we kind of fold them together. I think that's important. So I think that's a much more practical, pragmatic, and effective and efficient way of working on the topic of regional economy, recovery, and moving forward. Thanks. So any comments? Maybe I should ask you, is there any comment regarding what I said?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Jesse that.
Please, thank you.
Yes, Councilman Burley, and thank you for those comments. And yes, just to address the region equity and inclusion, that is a lens that we're putting across all of our work. It was a foundational element of the ED plan, and many of our individual programs and projects are looking at equity, including workforce. We do know that, for example, that workers of people of color or lower income jobs were disproportionately affected, and that is a focus of workforce work for ourselves. In terms of those items where we may know enough to start some work, they mentioned childcare is one that is an area that we have heard loud and clear, and Philly is engaging much more deeply in that space to see what those real barriers are, to see if we can begin to chip away at some of those. Another one is those activations. We do know that the work we did with the BDA last year around Old Bellevue to bring outdoor dining really did have a strong impact for our Main Street businesses. So that's one that takes a lot of resourcing. So that is one that's really taking a priority at the moment. And then from a regional perspective, the retail analysis, we are engaging with our regional partners, with our East Side neighbors, as well as some of the other retail focused cities in the region to bring that amount of research together so that we have some regional understanding of what's going on. So those are some of the ways that we're tackling those items. And then Philly, do you have any additions around some of our work with GSP in that regional recovery plan?
Yeah, I was going to mention between staff and council, thank you, Councilmember Lee and Mayor Robinson for participating on the GSP recovery work. There's 4 task forces right now that are all having conversations about how we can align and then accelerate our efforts in this recovery, really looking at it through an equitable and inclusive lens. The metrics that we're developing right now really have that as the forefront in the center, and then the programs need to respond to those metrics. So there should be in the next couple of months, by the end of the next couple of months, a really good idea of what those signature projects are that we as a region, there's over 200 regional stakeholders participating in this effort, can again align around to really work in tandem to achieve those goals. And we'll be presenting an update on that later throughout the year once there's those concrete actions.
If you don't mind, thank you. I have 2 more specifics. One is that
Councilmember Lee,
yeah,
let us move on to the other people, and then we can come back to you if we need to.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jesse and Philly. I really appreciate the update, and also just your diligence in applying an equity lens throughout the work that you're doing. So it was good to see the distribution of grants in that sense. I was curious in terms of the arts, entertainment, and recreation, just given that it is one of the harder hit areas. It looked like the funding was a little bit smaller than expected. So I was just curious about maybe what that was. Maybe I misinterpreted it. And then you had mentioned, Philly, that some businesses didn't want to apply for the grants in the first round, and was curious about, what some of the reasons were there. Last 2 parts, broadening the focus across the city. I know we're talking about downtown and Bel Red. What's the timeline for thinking about other areas like Crossroads and Factoria? And then in terms of childcare, I'd be interested in knowing how neighborhood childcare centers would impact sort of the access and affordability of childcare once we get to that point, if we don't have any data about it already. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'll go ahead and tackle some of the last questions around. For the the grants, what I mentioned, some people didn't apply the first time. That was for the PPP, which was a loan. There, I think there was a lot of confusion around it the first time. Also, there was more restrictive requirements. We were also earlier in the pandemic, so people didn't know if they actually needed it. So that's why this current round, we're seeing more people with kind of those clearer requirements around forgiveness take advantage of it. In terms of childcare, I just had a conversation today with Human Services, Childcare Aware, as well as Childcare Resources, and that was the first of hopefully many conversations, open information sharing. They have some great data that they're going to share with us on a Bellevue specific level of the amount of childcare facilities, the number of spots and availability, and what some of those barriers are and how we might be able to address them, both from, there's kind of state licensing requirements and then also local things that we might be able to do. So we'll report back on the details of that, but really great to kind of open up those lines of communication and do a deep dive there. Arts and entertainment, I think you mentioned those were for the city grants. So I think that didn't account for all artists there. Let's see. Oh, some of those were counted in educational services. So depending on their NACE code, there was some overlap between those. So I think I covered most of those. Was there something I missed?
I can cover the geographic equity question. And it's a great question, Councilmember Barksdale, and we have heard from the council that we want to make sure we're covering the entire city. So just as way of background, we're taking the opportunities to work with the Bell Red and downtown areas first because we have the strongest partners there. So our goal is to help catalyze and set up some initial programs that we can work on them with, and then they're able to replicate and carry those projects and programs forward on their own while we focus on other parts of the city. We do hope that, or part of the goal with the citywide retail study is to begin to engage with more of the retailers and stakeholders in Crossroads and Factoria and other neighborhoods of the city, so that we can start to identify who might be part of those future merchant associations, we'll say, that would help us provide that additional service. So it's an iterative process, and we're hoping to be able to have some initial discussions with those additional neighborhoods in 2022 and 2023.
Okay. I just wonder, just given that there's already quite a bit of support for downtown and Bell Red, if there's a way that we could maybe expedite, maybe more so downtown than Bell Red, but some of the support to Crossroads and Factoria. But
we will continue looking for those opportunities, and we are engaging with particularly the owners of Factoria and Crossroads Mall to help be those initial pillars for those neighborhoods. And we will, for example, on things like the outdoor dining, we will be doing a more concerted push this year to make sure that restaurants in those neighborhoods do know that that is an option for them.
Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And great presentation, Jesse and Philly. Thanks for the update. I want to follow up on Councilmember Barksdale there. I think I might know the answer on this, but on the retail study and the survey, are we able to separate the downtown responses from the rest of the city? I think that might be very valuable to see that, to really understand. So I think when it gets all put together, we might be seeing a picture that's not entirely accurate of how those businesses and restaurants, et cetera, in the Crossroads, Factoria, et cetera, some of the things that the issues that they're dealing with and some of their biggest concerns. So can we separate that data when we get the results from those two studies and the survey?
Yes, that will be part of the scope of work for the consultant. And I will add that the business survey, the city's biennial business survey, we are also able to deaggregate based on neighborhood. And that is one of our criteria every year for that. So that
fantastic.
will be coming to you as well.
Thank you. I know it wasn't part of this update, but I'm curious if in future updates we're going to be hearing anything about the economic development opportunities that have arisen due to the 5G Open Innovation Lab that were in partnership with T-Mobile and the University of Washington, and then the Innovation Partnership Zone. Are we hearing anything there yet, or is that going to be a separate update for us potentially later in the year?
We are working with the leadership over at the 5G Lab on a possible independent update. The timing has not worked out well so far, but we're working on that.
Okay. And then lastly, are we able to pull out some of the data? And I understand these are not, your numbers per se, but for example, on the top metro area economies in the U.S., are we able to decipher what percentage that might be of Bellevue rather than just getting lumped into all of Seattle? Just curious if you might have any thoughts on that, even if it is a bit fuzzy and not accurate, but just curious to see where Bellevue stacks up in terms of the entire metro area.
That's also a fantastic question, Deputy Mayor. And we did talk with our analysts internally, and the aggregating down to the Bellevue level it's more. The juice is not worth the squeeze is the way I would phrase that one. It's a lot of work to deaggregate the commute data, the productivity data, all of those pieces, and we wouldn't be able to provide strong confidence that that number was accurate. Okay. So the county level data that Philly mentioned earlier is about the lowest we can deaggregate it to.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for following up on that. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Jesse and Philly. Another great presentation. Just excited to see the implementation of the new work plan and the COVID outreach that we're doing, with the money coming from the state. I would like to make sure, what you said, Jesse, about it's a tale of two cities. So the ability to really help those that have struggled the most to be able to be tied to additional resources and grant funding that's available will be really important. And then as I think about the creative economy, right, again, really looking through that equity lens, I really like the conversation so far about really looking at neighborhood businesses. And I would say that it's not just, I agree with the Crossroads and the Factoria, but it's also Lake Hills and Newport Hills. And so the smaller neighborhood businesses, and how do we help them be more activated as they come out of COVID. I like the fact that we're doing this study and really looking at the gaps, because I do think as people are trying to support the businesses in Bellevue, we are seeing that maybe we don't have the kind of diverse restaurants and retail that other communities might, maybe because the rents are so high in Bellevue. So if we could really look at what are the barriers to those more diverse businesses and restaurants to be able to be in Bellevue and to be able to get started, I think that'll be an important aspect. And then I did have two questions. One is, I know that in the plan we talked about an eco district. So I wanted to understand what the timing is of actually looking into an eco district, slightly differently than the creative economy, the East Hub, and the 5G lab. And then my second question is on the workforce development. I really like the phrase "go big," right? I think that we actually benefit from more workforce development in terms of jobs and people being employed. And I'm just wondering about language access, partnering with community-based organizations, because when I see the 6 organizations that we partnered with to go after the economic development grant, I'm wondering if there are some other organizations to partner with that may be more tied to the underserved communities a bit more. And also, as we look more regionally, so we might be more attractive for grants, looking at some other partnerships opportunities. So those were my 2 questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. I will touch the Eco District very briefly and then look to Philly to talk about the workforce. And that's an area where diversity and equity is definitely taking the lead. With regards to the Eco District, that timeline is still very much TBD. We are working with Jennifer Ewing, the manager for our environmental stewardship program. And that work will, of course, require engaging with some of our outside developers and others, some of our local corporate tenants as well, to understand what that development plan looks like. But we'll make sure that either through ourselves or through Jennifer, we do keep the council updated on that timeline.
Okay, that would be really good because I think we talk a lot about green jobs, and so the Eco District would be a big part of that.
Go ahead, Philly.
In terms of workforce, we're kind of diving deep into the ecosystem discovery and understanding what all the organizations are that touch workforce, how they're connected or maybe not connected, and where there might be opportunities to make that connection. So that's definitely part of it, is that outreach and understanding, and then connecting them to the both East Side ecosystem as well as the regional ecosystem to be able to align those efforts. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement and a lot of great opportunities that will come out of this work. Just one, quick success story in that front is, the East Side Refugee and Immigrant Coalition, Debbie Lacey, they've been talking about Welcome Back Center on the East Side for some time. Bellevue College actually is piloting that with using Highline College's successful model, bringing them over. Those were two conversations that were happening independently, and be able to connect them, work together, collaborate for a better result. So really trying to be that connector and convener right now in this space as we discover where those gaps and needs are. So exciting, and we're excited to bring future updates to you.
Yeah, I think that is very exciting. And so perhaps I see Bellevue College there, but I don't see the Bellevue School District, and being one of the members of their STEM advisory board, I wonder if you can reach down to the high school level as well as part of the whole pipeline for workforce development.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Council members on, I might just jump in also. You raised a theme that we've heard from a couple of council members here as well about neighborhood serving business and having a good foundational lay of the land and understanding what our business climate is, particularly at the retail level, which is so much around placemaking. It comes up all the time. It's come up in our neighborhoods work. It comes up through our planning work. And there's been a real focus of the city to stabilize neighborhood shopping centers and have local neighborhood land uses. So a couple of things I just want to mention. We have instituted through our planning work, new zoning districts like the neighborhood mixed use district that we put out in Eastgate with a specific idea to try to help incentivize some of those kinds of uses. They're not fully implemented yet. You're only seeing the first projects come out of the ground right now, but the city's working through its planning efforts as well. What the retail study will allow us to do is look citywide and then aggregate down to the very local level, what we're very strong in and what we have a good symbiotic ecosystem in, and where we can improve. And that data will help inform future decision-making around placemaking opportunities. It could be removing regulatory barriers to entry or future updates to land use codes. It could be things to put into our neighborhood planning process. So there's a variety of different ways we can go about it. A significant thing though will be allow us to look at cross-referencing that retail study with what we're missing in the marketplace and what we're seeing in our Convention and Visitor Bureau work. What are we missing to be an interesting place that brings people in from outside the city? So there's a lot of different ways we'll be able to go with that, but sort of the first step is we have not been as deliberate as a community about studying retail and its impact on the local economy. Our ED efforts have mostly been about primary employment and job growth. So we're clearly doing very well in that. What we're hearing from a lot of our employers now is, boy, we wish we had a lot more of those kind of ground floor, super active uses. So we're kind of turning our attention that direction right now.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks. Well, I really appreciate the update, and I really like where we're going with the plan. And I have to say, this council, impresses me every time we talk economic development and many other topics, because it is so apparent how much each one of us values having a really thriving economy, both in terms of services and in terms of, you know, business success, but also in terms of jobs. And to the extent of, and so the job creation and the workforce development, I think, is really important, as is the neighborhood businesses that we talked about. We've talked about that a lot when we were I particularly talked about that a lot when we were crafting the economic development plan, and I know that we all care about that very much. So a couple of comments and a couple of questions. The childcare issue, I think, is really an important one, because without childcare, kids, parents can't work, and kids won't be cared for if the parents have to work. They need to be cared for well. So having that helps employers access the talent and helps people make a living because they can go to work. With the day 337, since the last time Bellevue School District was in session in the classroom, public schools are also a huge impact on that. I've asked, I'm just letting my colleagues know, I've asked online to see what data we have with regard to outmigration. I've heard that we had over 1,000 students who have disenrolled from Bellevue Public Schools over the last year, and a whole lot more are planning to if we don't get going back into schools soon. So to that end, when we are doing the survey on businesses, I think childcare is a really important component, because it's, again, where the talent is, where people can work. But I think this effect of schools and school closures should also be something. We're looking at what happened during COVID. That has got to be on there. What impact has that had? We know that women in the workforce is as low as it's been since the 80s. And it may not come back for a decade or more as far as women's participation rate in the workforce because of the school closures. So in part, but that's a significant part. So I think we need to have that in the survey. I also think we need to be working with the Bellevue School District in terms of what we can do and how we can work together to make the whole city sing. Because one of the reasons that people love to live in Bellevue is because of the excellent schools. And, you know, like I said, we're 337 days since the kids were last in school. And we don't know when they're going to go back in school. And is that going to have an impact on the success of our community? I don't know, but I think that's something we really need to know, and we need to work with the school district on. Secondly, on the retail study, I think that that's great. I know, and this is a question really for Brad, because I don't see transportation on anymore. One of the studies that I know that we approved in our budget last year was a curbside management study. It's not exactly the same as retail, but I do think that if the curbside management study is done this year, as it should be, before light rail opens, and as our economy starts to come back, I think that study will also have really good usefulness in conjunction with the retail study, because we've been allowing more people to use the streets for restaurant use. We did the pickup zones with regard to helping people get their takeout during COVID. I think the two things will dovetail really, really nicely. So I'd like to know where we are with the curbside management study. Is it going, and will it be done by the end of the year? So that's the first question. Then I'll just ask my second question or comment, and then let you guys talk. So the second is with regard to the art districts in Bellred. I hope that we will be looking at that issue when we do the Bellred look back, which will hopefully be soon. I just kind of need a nod that we will. I know we're going to be doing it sooner, but yeah, I mean, when we envisioned the Bellred corridor back in 2000, I worked on it in 2007 and 2008, and the council passed it in 2009. Having an arts district there was really important to the vision. I want to make sure that we include that in the look back. So I guess really my only question was about the curbside management study and confirming that we can include both the school issue with the childcare in the survey.
So I guess I'll, and on terms of the curbside management state, I would have to get back to you on that unless one of the other staff members hasn't answered that question. And I'd look to one of the deputies here on that particular question. If not, we'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
And then the survey, will that be included? Can we include that?
I'm sorry?
The question was about the survey. If we're talking about childcare and the business survey, can we include a question about the schools?
Councilmember Robertson, yes, we are including childcare in our general business retention engagement question survey. And then we are going to be also looking at childcare in the biennial survey as well.
And schools, public schools, right, too, also? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, and I think we'd all be interested in the answers to those. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jesse and Phil. This has been really illuminating, really amazing how much you're covering on this. I had three areas that I think are really important in your presentation that I... Oh, or something else. That I really like the emphasis on is the Bellevue Arts District. You know, we, other people have commented about this. We started working on that and talking about that when I first came on council, and we've worked on it with the Arts Commission over the years. You know, looked at different ways to approach that and all that, and we just never seemed to get traction on it. And unfortunately, we've lost some opportunities to help the different arts groups stay in the area because of the, you know, as Bellevue gets developed and the light rail comes through and all the property values go up and all that, and that's a concern. So I'm glad to see us really putting our effort into that now, and I think that's very, very important. And I really love the effort on small business support, and we need to do more of that. I think you're making great strides on that. And the other one is and a lot of things people have been mentioning goes back to this, is the placemaking and activation. That is really important when it gets down to it, to go to some of the comments, and I think Jennifer mentioned and others mentioned this too, is that Janice did too. We, you know, focusing, I understand we have to make choices, and you're focusing on Bellevue and you know, East and Factoria, and those are important to it. But one of the things we hear a lot in the city as well, you know, Eastgate or Lake Hills or Newport Hills really don't get the attention. And I think we have to find a way to not have people stacked in and take too long to get to. It's just like the neighborhood planning. You know, if you're a neighborhood, it's not going to be engaged in planning for 9 years or 7 years, things change, as we know, between that. So I think we need to, because businesses, there's just a lot going on in Eastgate and you know, Lake Hills, and I think it's going to increase. So some way we've got to, if we need more, I don't know, focus on or something, not wait too long to look at those areas too, in terms of businesses and restaurants and all those other kind of things, because that really makes the whole city vibrant. And I think that's just another equity issue that we have to deal with. On the schools thing, and I appreciated Councilmember Robertson's comments about this, particularly the childcare thing. And if the issue came up, and I didn't mention this, my daughter, who is, that's what she works on with the state, would want to know why I didn't raise an issue on it. And I agree. This is a big issue that we have to deal with in Bellevue, and it has a lot to do with the economy and businesses. So hopefully we get information about that. The schools issue, and I'm on this superintendent's school kind of advisory committee working about looking at the budget and where their equity and things that are going on, working on. And my stupid phone, sorry. I think that I would like us to look at the school thing a little more open-minded in terms of the impacts and all that. The problem is that, unfortunately, for a lot of people, schools are a childcare agency when it comes down to it, and it makes it tough. So, and it affects women who have to stay home and help the kids. I have also, I think, before we go too far down a particular line on that, is that there's some pretty good studies that go back to other comparable time periods when kids didn't go to school, and actually they did quite well. I mean, it's not a direct correlation. So, but I do think that we need to look at childcare as an incentive with businesses, and look at it in terms of overall health and welfare of the citizens here. So I think we're on a good path. It's just that when you're doing these things and doing them so well and focused, it really makes you want to say, okay, this is great, but there are these other areas and things that need to be worked on too. So it's not quite, Janice's thing of embracing the go big or go home, which is something I believe in. But I would like us to see, hope we don't take too long to get around to these other areas, because as we know now, we can't, waiting 6-7 years to come look at something loses a lot, and things can change so quickly that we end up kind of not being prepared to deal with something because we didn't pay attention to it. We didn't have it on the focus. I know it's putting a lot on the city to do this, but I would like to see as much of a comprehensive review on these areas as we can. I think it's very important. But great work, and I'm really looking forward to the implementation of a lot of these pieces. And it's I think a big step forward that I've seen in the economic development and the cultural development in these last few years. So congratulations on that. I think you really elevated this whole thing to another very high level, and that is much appreciated. And we need to work hard as the council to support that and help. If we were talking about wanting to focus more on other things, we need to help you find a way to do that. So I think we can work together on that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know it's getting really late and I have 3 questions. I'll try to be really quick, and if your answers are super long, you can get back to me offline if you'd like. But my 3 questions, first of all, I'm wondering what your metric for success is with your workforce work that you're doing. So how are you going to measure your success on that? The second thing is on the employer satisfaction survey. I'd be really interested to know what percentage of employees are able to live and who worked in Bellevue, and then what the biggest obstacle is for them, because I think that it's well known that any commute more than 15 minutes kind of decreases your work production and your quality of life. So it would behoove employers to have their employees closer to where they work. So I'd be really curious to know what the percentage of employees that work in Bellevue live in Bellevue, and what's the biggest obstacle to them not living in Bellevue, those who don't. And then the third question is on that Seattle metro area on that scale. So we made 10, which is awesome. Where were we previously? Did we just bump up 1 step? Did we used to be 11, or did we bump up quite a bit? So you can pick and choose your answers on these.
Thank you. We'll work backwards on those. With regards to the metro area, we bumped Atlanta out of 10th place. So we did advance from 11th to 10th. And I think GSP would like to help us figure out how we can bump Philadelphia out of the 9th spot while encouraging equitable growth across the region. With regards to the employer survey, we do ask questions around workforce and commute. I think one of the data points that I have offhand is that at last count, somewhere between 80 to 90% of the people who worked in Bellevue did not live in Bellevue. We've not dived specifically into the individual barriers on that, but we'll take a look and see what data we can find out of the survey. And then with regards to the workforce program and the metrics for success, we did work with our partners as we were developing that EDA grant application on a variety of metrics that would have been measuring our progress. Philly, do you have any of those offhand, or should we get back to the council on that?
I do not have those offhand. The kind of the regional metrics are still being developed, and we will report out on those. They're very, very specific. And then I think we would, from that, do a drop down on a Bellevue level, and then across a variety of opportunities in the pipeline to see those metrics and see that sustained success with the programs.
So Mayor, I think I'd like to just add, as you've raised this issue a couple of times, it's a poignant issue to think about the commute time and or capture rate of people that live and work in Bellevue versus people that live in Bellevue and commute out to work. And the issue of, I'll just say, how we can capture more people living and working in Bellevue is of tantamount importance. And we're hearing it from our major employers as well. It's not just something we're talking about at the city. Everyone is worried about, okay, we're growing in jobs. Where are the people going to live? And how are we going to have a healthier mix? It's good for commuting. It's good for quality of life. There's a lot of good things about tackling that issue. So our ED staff and our planning staff are doing a lot of work thinking about how those two things cross-pollinate. So you're likely to see that discussion come up in planning forums as well around jobs, housing imbalance, and how we want to think about job growth versus creation of new housing. And you're seeing it in affordable housing work as well. So when we bring that up, we'll try to also you talk about commute times and some of the stuff that came up tonight to link it all back in so you can all see it in the different formats.
So I guess I'm just wishing that when you do the survey that you put something in there that asks what the obstacles are so that we have an idea whether it's a choice or if it's affordability or whatever other reason it might be. So I don't know if you have that freedom to add questions, but I'd be really interested in knowing that data for all the reasons you just said, Mac. Okay, well, this has been a great meeting. And so I can see Councilmember Lee would like to have another bite at the apple. So I will give him a chance and I will let you all raise your hands if you'd like to speak again. I'm gonna limit you to 3 minutes each though. I've been very generous because it's such important topics tonight, but I think that as it's getting late, we'll just go max 3 minutes each, okay? Starting with Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Won't be more than 3 minutes, will be short. Number one, I want to compliment the staff in their discussion on business relief grant. Even though the amount is not that big. However, if you look at the results, 64% female owned, 66% minority owned, 41% immigrant refugee owned. They did a good job. They listened to us. So thank you. And the point I want to make, 2 points is, we work on the regional basis and locally too. We, the legislature people, Joyce reported earlier, we are expecting, hopefully, the state legislature will discuss TIF, tax incremental financing. That's economic development too. That's getting revenue to develop all the infrastructure systems we need. And that is economic development. So I think we need to pay attention on that, both regionally working together because it is a statewide topic. And I think we have a great opportunity. So we need to put some emphasis. And I didn't hear it mentioned. So I think it's important to talk about it. The other one is smart cities initiatives. And Councilmember Robertson mentioned this curbside management thing. It is important. And there are other things too that we can look into, how to make working for employees going back and forth from transportation hubs and within the city itself, mobility, it's important. And I think that's something that's going to bring us unique and that's good for the region as well, not just locally, citywide. But I think it's another initiative we need to look at. So I hope that in our, I assume you're doing those things. I hope you are, because I've been talking to you on those things. Talk to your transportation director, right? And but I hope we just kind of ignore to mention it, but I hope you are working on this. And I really wish the council, unless some council members don't support it. And I think we do. We already put our legislative agenda. We discussed it extensively under our budget discussion. So please make sure we see some progress. And I would like to hear a brief follow-up on those two topics. If you want to do it now, probably not, because they may won't allow you. But we would like to hear about it. Thank you.
We can't hear you, Mayor.
You're muted.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question or make a comment? I'm getting the same response whether you hear me or not. I think we all look forward to hearing the answers to some of the questions that you weren't able to answer tonight. And so if you could do some communication to all of us, that would be great. And thank you, this is great. Imagine if you were only having this once a year. This is quarterly that we're meeting with you and we're this interested. So really good presentation. Thank you, everybody. I think we are at the end of our agenda, so we are adjourned. Good night.
Good night.